and City Attorney Clifton Fair. Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council. Mayor Skip Henderson. City Manager Isaiah Hughley. Pops Barnes, District 1. Glenn Davis, District 2. Bruce Huff, District 3. Valerie Thompson, District 4. Charmaine Crabb, District 5. Gary Allen, Mayor Pro Tem and District 6. Mimi Woodson, District 7. Walter Garrett, District 8. Judy Thomas, Post 9 at-large Council. John House, Post 10 at-large Council. Sandra Davis, Clerk of Council. And City Attorney Clifton Fair. Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council.
Good evening and welcome, welcome to the July 28th City Council meeting. All of those that are here present are also joined by Councilors Woodson and Garrett, who are joining us through the magic technology. Both of them are getting over some medical issues. They are with us. Before we get started, we want to begin as we begin all of our City Council meetings, and that is by invoking God's presence. So I'm going to ask Councilor Valerie Thompson if she would please lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Our most heavenly, gracious Father, we thank you tonight for your love, your kindness, and your tender mercy. Okay. And Father God, we just thank you, first of all, on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Father God, we thank you for your many, 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 many blessings, your abundant blessings.
Oh, I thought you said.
And Father God, as we proceed in this meeting on tonight,
I thought you told me to.
Father God, we pray for our mayor. We pray for various levels of city government, city officials, and in particularly for this assembled council. Father God, grant us the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true. And may we always be guided by the spirit of community, Father God, by the spirit of justice and by the spirit of love. Father God, we pray now for this agenda that has been set before us. And Father, we pray tonight that what we do in this place will be done decent and in order. In the mighty name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
If you would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'll go to the flag. You stay on.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion on the minutes from the July 14th meeting. There's a motion by the Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilor Barnes. Anybody have any edits or any questions or comments about the minutes? All in favor, please say aye. Is there anybody opposed? All right, they are approved. Very quickly, give you a little bit of an update on the COVID-19 pandemic as it is impacting Columbus, Georgia. Again, we monitor in our office with the help of the Department of Public Health and with the help of our area hospitals. We monitor the numbers on a daily basis. And they have been stabilizing somewhat. It does not mean that we have turned a corner or beaten the virus. It simply means that this community, in all of its efforts, are having an impact on at least keeping them plateaued. The numbers are high, but they seem to be stabilized and have been for the last several days. We are at 3,976, just under 4,000 total confirmed cases of COVID-19. We had another individual of this community lose their life, so we are at 76 Columbus residents who have passed away. Yesterday we had 83 new cases. We're monitoring sort of a 7-day rolling average, and as I've mentioned before, what that means is we take the most recent 7 days, average them, and get a daily average for where we are. And just a few weeks ago, we were up in the 110, 115 range. We're now at about 65 for the rolling 7-day average. Again, I will tell you, we went with some of our outstanding men and women from Columbus Fire and EMS, and we're giving out masks. That organization gave out over 20,000 masks over about a 3-day period. And the encouraging thing to me as I stood out there with a couple of them was that people were wearing them. They were putting them on. Many businesses are now urging people to wear masks when they come inside. I will tell you that most of the government buildings require masks, and I hate to say that when I'm holding mine in my hand, but we are, as you can tell, we are extremely socially distanced. The recommended 6 feet in our setup has been turned into 15 feet. So we are, if you follow the CDC guidelines, you will recognize the fact that the masks need to be worn, particularly when you are within 6 feet of another individual. But I do want to thank those of you that have been participating in social distancing, wearing your masks, and washing your hands and paying attention to your body. If you feel poorly, stay home. That is the cure. That is the only way to arrest the spread of The lieutenant is doing an outstanding job. I can't think of anybody else I'd rather have in that position as we try to make these decisions than him. All right, and lastly, before I move on, I want to remind you, if you have not filled out your census form, I would ask for a show of hands, but I better not see any. You need to go online. It takes about 5 minutes. My 87-year-old dad went on his iPhone and filled out his census, so I know you guys can do it too. It's so critical. We've talked to you about the significant impact it means for this community. We've talked about some of our most underserved citizens and limiting access to funds to help to provide for them. So it is critical. And I will even throw in the city manager's key reason is his competitive nature. We know we're the second largest city in Georgia, but nobody else knows it if we don't fill out that census and beat another city with shovel nameless at this particular point in time. All right?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilor Barnes.
You mentioned the excellent job that the fire department does. Saturday, in all that heat, at the Piggly Wiggly on St. Mary's Road, I took their names, and I want Chief Lang to know, really appreciate it, that Lieutenant Greg Garner, Sergeant K. Starling, Sergeant A. Dunham,
That's all the way up.
and firefighter A. Wright, they were out there giving out masks. And so that, that shows the commitment that our employees have in the fire, EMS, and of course, Columbus CPD. So really appreciate the caliber of individuals that we have.
Thank you, Councilor Barnes. And I could not have planned this better from your comments to the next order of business for me, and it's one that I'm extremely pleased to engage in. I am bringing to council my nominee for the new chief of the Columbus Fire and EMS, and I'm going to ask Chief Scarpa if he'll come up to the podium as I tell you a little bit about him, and Chief Lang, if you would join him. And before I introduce Chief Scarpa, let me just tell you how eternally grateful and incredibly impressed I have been with Chief Lang. This gentleman took over an interim position simply to help out, delayed his retirement, and guided us. Did not know there was a pandemic around the corner, and I'm telling you, the man's integrity and his efforts have allowed us to navigate some of the issues that we have faced as well as we have. So Chief, let me just say before we start with Chief Scarpa, thank you for your dedication and all you've done for this community. just want to say, can you get that turned on?
It's on.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for all those good comments. I just want to thank you for having the trust and confidence in me to lead this great organization over the last 6 months during this transition. But like any organization, without good people back here behind me, I'm not successful. So I want to give all the thanks to the staff, people that are behind me right now. And again, I just want to thank you again. And it's been a great career. I was telling the city manager the other day on our virtual directors meeting, be 3 months shy of 39 years in October, and I couldn't have picked a better career. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to retirement, of course, but I told Chief Scarpa here earlier today, it's never felt like a job. I felt like I was coming to something that was an adventure to me. You know, I was always looking for new ways of doing things, trying to make the department better than what it was, and I think we've done that. And I think we'll continue to do that with his leadership. So again, thank y'all.
Thank you, Chief. Well, this is a real pleasure for me. And Salvatore Scarpa, we will call him Sal, or we'll call him Chief, but he goes by Sal. And I will tell you that the process that we followed that led us to Chief Scarpa was an arduous one. We had some amazing candidates to choose from. But I'll tell you a little bit about Sal. It's almost like from an early age he had his sights set on a career in the fire and emergency medical field. He has an associate degree in fire sciences, then went and got his bachelor's in public administration, and then got a master's in leadership. He started his career in '91 as a firefighter. In '95, he was battalion chief from '95 to 2013 in North Kansas City, with North Kansas City Fire Department. And a couple of things, I don't want to go through his whole resume because it is extensive, but a few things that I touched on that I thought would resonate with his community. As a battalion chief, he developed a regional hazardous materials team that supported the city and 3 of the surrounding counties of the metropolitan Kansas City region. He understands the administrative side. He managed the fleet, the department's fleet program, providing for acquisition, repair, and replacement of all those fire apparatus. He developed and delivered organizational training in all disciplines to support the department efforts in professional development and continuing ed. And he also fulfilled emergency management responsibilities, which as we have seen over the last several months are critical. So we look forward to his leadership in that as well. And he also worked with a regional incident response team member on hazmat. So he's got those skills as well. In 2013, he was named Deputy Chief of the Shawnee Fire Department in Shawnee, Kansas. While there, some of the things that I was impressed with, he formalized a professional development program with succession planning for the folks in his fire department. He handled a successful accreditation process for his department. The department is now accredited, and he serves as that accreditation manager. He also worked on their ISO rating, taking it from the ISO 3 to 1. So he's got a lot of background. But I can tell you, I think the thing that impressed us, one thing that resonated with us during our conversations with Chief Scarpa is he came with not only a resume, but with a 6-month business plan of what he wanted to do and accomplish in very broad terms that included seeking the input of the individuals that he would be leading. And the other thing I can tell you, there were 11 individuals that sat on 3 different panels.
Yes, sir.
And again, I reiterate, we had some absolutely incredible individuals that applied for this position. And every one of them came back and said, that's the guy. So it is my pleasure to present to you, Council, for your consideration and confirmation as the Chief of Columbus Fire EMS,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sal Scarpa.
No
I'll
problem.
entertain a motion. Second. Motion and a second to approve or confirm Chief Scarpa. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Chief, welcome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, men and women of the management team who are here and remoting in. I appreciate this opportunity to be here. This is a great privilege and honor for me. I just want to thank a couple of people real quick. First, I want to thank God for the many blessings He has given me, the doors He has opened for me, and those He has closed for me that created the path that brought me here to Columbus tonight.
That sounds clear.
I'm truly blessed. To my family who is unable to travel with me tonight, but I know are watching remotely, they have been supportive of me and been my rock and my steady ship throughout this journey of my public safety career. So thank you to them for all their love and support. There are those people in your life that will stand beside you during your difficult times and that share your successes when you have those. And I'm privileged and blessed to have those people in my life, and those people also were unable to travel with me, but I know are watching remotely. And I'm eternally grateful for their infinite support. To the men and women of Columbus Fire and EMS, so many of whom have honored me here tonight with their presence, under the incredible leadership of Chief Lang, who is an amazing individual. They have been so gracious to me and welcoming to me, and I'm just honored by being here tonight. And I look forward to the privilege of working with all of you. Thank you. And finally, to the citizens of our great city, to the business and military community of Greater Muskogee County, it is my great privilege and honor to serve as your next fire chief. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for this honor. Thank you very much. Thank you. Chief Scarpa, we're looking forward to your time here in Columbus, Georgia, and I tell you, the department that you have the privilege of leading is an absolutely incredible department. They're professional men and women, and they're just unbelievable assets to this community. So we look forward to seeing you around Columbus, and I believe the chief will actually, his first day will be August 10th.
All right.
So he's anxious to get started. We're anxious to see him. Thank you, sir. All right, and one last thing I will mention: we're glad to see Councilor Thomas back in person in the council chambers today. Welcome back. We missed you. All right. Next, we'll move on to the city attorney's agenda.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I am.
Councilor Huff, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I could take a point of personal privilege real quick.
Yes.
Had a situation with a young couple. They just bought a house over off of 17 Hilton area and did not know the rules of the city. So they hired a contractor because they had an 18-year-old, 17-year-old drivers with a 12-year-old, and they had to back out into the street. So they were concerned about their children, having an accident and getting hurt. So they hired a contractor to extend the driveway to a circular driveway, and found out at the day of time, concrete truck was there to pour concrete, that no one had pulled a permit and didn't go through the proper channels. So everything's at a halt right now. So we're requesting a meeting with you, city manager, engineering, coast inspection, and Councilor Garrett is in that area, and anybody else we need, just to try to clear it up so we can get them squared away, and they look forward to meeting you under these conditions. But it's something simple. We rode the neighborhood and we found several others, one right across the street, diagonally across the street, and some around the corner. So it's nothing rare in the area. They just didn't follow the proper procedure. So they said they'll be more than happy to purchase a permit or whatever else they need to purchase to get it done.
We will. I'll speak on a rare occasion for the city manager and tell them we were happy to sit and talk with you and those individuals, see if we can't get it taken care of.
Okay.
All right. Yes, sir. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I will be happy as you
they said to sit with him, but he really needs to go and see Deputy City Manager Hodge and the new Director of Inspections and Codes
Yeah, we're requesting anyone that you think should be in the room.
well, I really don't need to be there.
Okay, well, engineer, whoever you
And so
said,
my appropriate staff need to be,
Okay.
they need to be there.
we want the appropriate staff so we can get work done.
Okay, so,
I just want to make sure you knew about it.
well, I will be happy to have Deputy City Manager Hodge and Ryan Pruitt to meet with them.
Yeah, and someone from engineering.
Well, yes,
Yeah, engineering left the
yes.
tag, so I thought they might need to be.
Well, and that would be Ali Applehoney.
Okay,
So they will be happy to meet with him to resolve it.
okay, we want to get them together and the mayor and talk about it.
Well, my staff will be
Yeah,
happy
you
to
understand.
Yeah, I promise you, if I sit there, I'm gonna look at Deputy City Manager Hodge and say, yes, ma'am.
I don't need to be there,
Okay,
All right,
but
thank
my
you, sir.
appropriate staff will be happy to meet with him.
okay, thank you.
We'll have the right people in the meeting. You just set it up. Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome again to Chief Sal. I'll leave it at his first name right now. We've got a lot of business items to get through tonight, Mayor. First couple involve zoning, rezoning on Buena Vista Road. The first one up is 1.15 acres at 4204, 4216, 4220 Buena Vista Road. It's ready for adoption.
Motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Is there anybody opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously.
That passes. The next one is for a convenience store at 4228 Buena Vista Road, right down the street. And it has one condition, Mayor, that we may need to clear up here. Is anybody from planning here, Ms. Hodge? I think they meant to say business hours of operation shall be prohibited from midnight to 6 a.m.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Can we get an amendment just to change that condition?
Motion by the Mayor Pro Tem to amend. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Barnes. Any discussion? All in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Okay. With that, we can vote on the entire ordinance.
Motion approved by Councilor Thomas. I heard a second from the Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion on the ordinance? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes.
Thank you. Now we have the school district millage on second reading. As you recall, we had a tentative rate last week. The school board has certified 23.321 mills, so we need to get an amendment to get that final number.
Okay, I'd like to do it. Councilor Craven and I had talked, and Councilor Garrett, so we just like to amend it to the 23.21, 23.321. In watching the meeting that we spoke of last meeting, it was just a misspoken number at their meeting. So they cleared it up from their work session to their regular meeting and sent it back to the city that is 23.321. So we'd like to move approval.
All right, there's a motion second to amend. I know the Councilor Thomas.
Mr. Mayor, I know that Dr. Lewis is here tonight, and I don't know if there's enough confusion in the community that we may need him to at least tell us what we've just done, what we're doing here.
That's a good idea. I was just about to offer the school superintendent an opportunity to come to the podium. Welcome, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. Permission to unmask, sir?
Permission granted. Just stay over there.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So to clarify and to clear this up, we for a long time as a school district, almost 20 years, over 20 years, had a mill rate of 23.37. That held consistent, as I said, for a number of years, up until 2017 when we actually dropped the millage rate to 23.321. It stayed that way and remained that way. I think the confusion may lie in the fact that the digest actually dropped, which is unique from what we've had in the past. And I think one of our board members was asking in aggregate, how would we hold the revenue to be exactly the same as it was in past years, which led to the 23.404 that was originally proposed. When they realized that it would in fact increase, for some people, an increase of between $3 and $5, which would in fact be a tax increase for some, that's when they went back and revised it to the original rollback rate of 23.321. Although that will result in less overall revenue for the school district, that was what the intent was by the board member who proposed it, was to ensure that there was no increase of individual taxes. So that's why, hopefully that clears up any confusion.
I believe it does. Anybody else have any questions of Dr. Lewis while he's here? Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for your
service. Thank you very much. Safe travels to you, too. All right, any other discussion on the motion to amend? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that's amended.
Okay, with that amendment, Mayor, you can now pass the entire ordinance with 23.321 millage rate.
Motion to approve from Councilor Crabb, and I heard a second, I think, from Councilor House. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's approved.
The next item, Mayor, is the amendment to the Civic Center Advisory Board to allow 2 members of the Professional Sports League, including hockey. We've got a Canadian, I think, with a green card only that wants to serve on that board, and this would allow that. It's ready for adoption.
Motion second to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's approved.
All right, sir. Now, the next 2 items, Mayor, relate to the Public Safety Advisory Commission. Proposed amendments, first one by Councilor Barnes and second one by Mayor Pro Tem Allen. And I understand there'll be a lot of discussion on these. These are first reading public hearings, and anybody that wants to can speak for or against. We'll turn this first one over to Councilor Barnes.
Councilor Barnes.
Anyone in support of this can come up here and stand behind the speaker. Feel free.
Good evening, everyone. To our honorable mayor, Skip, city council, citizens. I am Mrs. Milt, and I am a member of downtown with the chapter of Advocacy Incorporated. I am only here to give a little perspective while you see many of these individuals here. 7 out of 13 national organizations, African American women's organizations, are here represented in support of Councilman Park-Barnes' resolution and the ordinance that he will speak of. And if you don't mind, we have a very small, short clip of the video that will give you a perspective why we're here in support of the ordinance.
Thank you for joining us today. I am Brenda Glover. I serve as International President, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Good afternoon. And Beverly Smith, the National President and CEO of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Good afternoon. I am Kimberly Jeffries Leonard, the National President of the Links Incorporated and the Links Foundation Incorporated.
Good afternoon. I am Valerie Hollingsworth Baker, International President of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated.
Good afternoon. I am Virginia W. Harris, President of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated.
Good afternoon. I am Rashida Liberty, National Vice President for Sigma Young Girls Sorority Incorporated.
Hi, my name is Melanie Campbell, and I'm the President and CEO of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation and the National Convener of the Black Women's Roundtable.
Hello, I'm Guinevere Catchings-Hess, and I'm President of the Black Women's Agenda.
My name is Margaret Gaines Clark. As the 37th National President of Girlfriends Incorporated.
My name is Danielle Brown, and I am the National President of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated.
Good afternoon. I am Sharon Beard, National President of Top Ladies of Distinction Incorporated.
Good afternoon. This is Susan Taylor, and I am the founder and CEO of the National Cares Mentoring Movement.
We are here as one united spirit, 13 women organizations. It was our vision to convene this coalition of African American women organizations to set an agenda for action. When George Floyd called out this month, he was calling out to all mothers and women around the world for justice. And we are here answering that call.
I am Janetta Betch Cole. I have the honor and the joy of serving as the President and the Chair of the Board of the National Council of Negro Women. With the 5 million Black women in all 13 national organizations, we call for sweeping federal legislation regarding police reform. We call for decertifying or terminating police officers who use lethal force in nonviolent offenses. Eliminate the use of chokeholds of all forms. Create a national database registry of law enforcement officers that were terminated because or by other cities or states. Require all police officers to wear
namely the Midland community. I represent the organization that you just saw, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I am a member of the the National Board of Directors, representing 3 states, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. And so I want to make sure that I represent to tell you that I support the ordinance and the resolution that Councilman Barnes is presenting today. I want to publicly thank him for having a conversation, because nothing can be done if you don't have a seat at the table. We appreciate that, Councilman Barnes. And so I just heard today, as they laid to rest, a very good friend of mine, that we see things written on paper, but it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't bring anything out of you within. And so I'm asking you to look beyond the paper, what's written on the paper, and let's do the right thing from our heart. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Renita Harris, and I am the South Georgia State Coordinator for the Double Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, as well as the outgoing president for the Columbus, Georgia Alumni chapter here locally. And I support the ordinance for Pop Barnes in regulations for police reform. I also have with me the presidents of 7 organizations, I believe, and I would like for them to introduce themselves.
Good evening. I'm Kia Chambers, and I'm the president of the Columbus, Georgia chapter of the Links Incorporated, and I support this ordinance and the resolution.
My name is Erica Thomas. I'm the president of Roro Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I support this ordinance.
Good evening. My name is Pauline Talley. I'm president of Gamma Tau Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I support this ordinance.
Good evening. I am Vicki Williams-Wiley, representing the Columbus Metropolitan Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. My president, Deidre Michelle Nelson Hawkins, and I come in support of the ordinance and support of Pop Barnes.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Mahoney, and I'm president of Epsilon Eta Zeta chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. I come to support Councilman Barnes for the ordinance and the resolution.
Great evening. My name is Pamela Watson, and I am the chapter president of the Columbus, Georgia chapter of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, and I too support the resolution and Pop Barnes. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
To Mr. Mayor and members of council, Mr. City Manager, and Mr. City Attorney, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you on the matter that's on the table tonight regarding positive police reform to include subpoena powers for the Public Safety Advisory Commission. I want to thank my city councilor, Councilor Pop Barnes, for his representation, for his leadership, and for his courage to bring this matter before the city council and the community for us to reason together. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of conflict and controversy." And as we celebrate the life of U.S. Congressman John Lewis, he always reminded us that sometimes you got to get in the way and have a little bit of good trouble. So, Councilor Barnes, we want to thank you for your leadership, for standing up in this time of conflict and controversy, and for your willingness to get in the way and get into some good trouble. I want you to know tonight that the people in black, and some that are not wearing black, you heard from the members of the various organizations, but we have additional citizens who are standing with us in support of you, Councilor Barnes, on this particular matter. We support the ordinance with subpoena power, and we support what is included in the resolution, because the resolution is our public statement
of what our community values should be as it relates to policing. Yes, the ordinance may not be perfect, but it's a good start. It's a place for us to start. Mr. Mayor and Council, I want to make a few points, and then I'm going to take my seat. I know and understand how difficult it is sometimes in making legislation. I know how to introduce it, how to work on compromise, and how to bring people together in compromise and without tearing the whole thing apart. When minor issues or concerns exist in legislation, we can have a small study committee to work out the differences without changing the intent of the legislation. But be clear, we want subpoena power. And we want subpoena power without interfering with any ongoing investigations. Mr. Mayor, I heard you when you took office and when you said that you wanted city staff to figure out how to make things happen versus how not to make things happen when it comes to requests from our citizens. Just because we have always done it that way doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. And I want you to know tonight that I agree with you. We come tonight looking for this attitude and for this approach from this body, not to fight, but to figure out how we can find the answer to the call from the people who are being hurt most by a lack of police reform all across this country. And let me be clear. Our public safety departments and personnel are good people, and we support them. But we want our policies to move us forward from good to great. The best time to get better is when you're already good. So we want this because we do not want to see our city go through what we have seen across this country. We need to be proactive, and now is the time for proactive leadership. And I hope I can count on you to do what needs to be done to approve positive police standards and the commission with subpoena power. And as I look around this room tonight, I see people on both sides of the issue, and as an elected official, I know every time you raise your hand to vote, somebody's with you and somebody's against you. But tonight, I say to you that look beyond the typical and look to what is right and what is fair for every citizen of our community. And Mr. Mayor, I want to leave you with a what if. What if you were to appoint a high-level commission of a diverse group of people to take a look at how we can resolve these differences and fit subpoena power in where it needs to be, with the expectation that there will be police reform and subpoena power? They could determine when subpoena powers would be allowed and when they would not be allowed, and they could figure out how to get this done rather than how not to get it done. As we enter a new era of leadership in public safety here in Columbus, Georgia, we want our standard to be that all people in this city are to be treated with dignity, respect, regardless of the color of their skin. And we want to show the world that we believe in increased transparency and accountability, fairness, and public safety. We want every citizen to be able to live his or her best life right here in Columbus, Georgia. Mr. Mayor and members of council, I want to thank you for your time. And again, Councilor Barnes, I want you to know that we salute you and we thank you for your leadership and your courage and your willingness to get into a little good trouble. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, Mr. City Attorney, Mr. City Manager. My name is Marvin Broadwater Sr. I reside at 3004 Slippery Rock Court, Columbus, Georgia, 31909. As always, thank you for your continued servant leadership to this community. I stand resolutely with Councilman Barnes and the ladies behind me, without hesitation or any mental reservations. I'm here this evening to ask you to vote in the affirmative for this ordinance. For the record, I'm not here to stain or show disdain toward any law enforcement officer, nor paint a broad brush. However, it is time for Columbus, Georgia to join the rest of America's cities who have passed similar ordinances. My question to you, Columbus City Council, do you stand with the will of the people? As I read the proposed ordinance, I was taken back to a memory of a traffic stop of my vehicle in Hamilton, Georgia, 2019. While I am a law-abiding citizen and believe strongly in this country's Constitution and Bill of Rights, having placed my life in danger a plethora of times to show my loyalty in its defense. On this particular day, I would be tested once again. My daughter-in-law had just passed, and I will admit I was a little distraught. I admitted to the officer initially during the stop that I was speeding and asked for a warning. He said no in a very threatening manner. He said, I must give you a ticket. As a military equal opportunity advisor for over 12 years, I have been trained to recognize aggressive posture as it is known in the equal opportunity community. Had my son not been there in the vehicle with me, I assure you that altercation would have ended not well. We realize that there are great law enforcement officers out there. However, we also realize that there are those out there like Derek Chauvin, the police officer accused of killing Mr. George Floyd and holding his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. A man in handcuffs calling out for the comfort of his mother. This ordinance addresses those such officers. My good friends, as I see it, this ordinance is not about political affiliations. It's not about whether you are a Democrat or Republican. It's not about your economic status. It's not about where you live in Columbus. It's not even about being black or white. You see, this ordinance, my friends, is about wrong or right. I encourage you to be on the right side of history. In my once chance meeting with the late Honorable John Lewis, Robert Lewis, I asked him, what can I do to continue the struggle? He stated in his low but eloquent voice, Broadwater is it? Get into good trouble, my son. At that time, I did not know what that meant. Now I do. And this is good trouble. It is to always fight for what is right. As I shared this sentiment with Governor Kemp's press secretary last Wednesday, while standing outside of his office, I asked him to deliver the following message to Governor Kemp. The will of the people is speaking directly to you, Governor. What is your retort? I am now appealing to you, Columbus City Council members. Look at the will of the people behind you. May your conscience and your soul speak to them through your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gorsuch. I would like to take a minute to speak before anyone else comes up. And I'd like to thank the courageous ladies that you see. In June of this year, there was a national virtual meeting of 13 African American sororities. At that meeting, they condemned in the strongest language, and I quote, the senseless and unjustified killing of black men, black women, black boys, and black girls. The Columbus members of this organization met with me and gave me an agenda items that included positive police reform guidelines. I want to thank you ladies from the bottom of my heart for your proactive commitment to making Columbus a better place to live. Now, in all things, and thank you, Representative Hughley, for that good trouble. There's been such a knee-jerk reaction to this proposed ordinance that I feel a need to clarify some issues. First of all, this is not an accusation against the Columbus Police Department or something that is in opposition to CPD. In fact, the first paragraph of the ordinance states, "The Commission shall strive to create a climate of mutual respect and partnership between the community and public safety departments, which help achieve safety, order, and justice for all the citizens of Columbus." Secondly, I told a meeting of CPD officers yesterday, my pleasure to meet with them, that they know I have a reputation of consistently supporting the Columbus Police Department. In fact, if you really want to know, I've been ridiculed by saying that because of my friendship, my personal long-standing friendship with Chief Warren, that I favor CPD. That is not true. Yes, I do have a friendship with Chief Warren that I had before I was elected to office. And guess what? He's retiring soon, and he will still be my friend after he retires. However, I have consistently supported the Columbus Police Department because I believe that we need to support the women and men whose job it is to keep us safe. And I want you to know, and I'm looking at some of you now, I have not changed my position. I disagree with you on this issue, but guess what? The one person that I disagree the most with is at 3720 Hawaii Way, my wife, but I love her dearly. This ordinance outlines guidelines for positive police procedures. Unfortunately, we have seen many times in the news, in fact, too many times, the physical abuse and death of African American men, women, and children, and other people of color by police officers who do not comply with their specific departmental guidelines of conduct. The positive police procedures or guidelines recommended here are to prevent that one or two officers from giving the many good, efficient police officers of the Columbus Police Department a bad name. Now, I hope that we are not naive enough to think that something like this cannot happen here in Columbus. I am still upset that I had to find out about the young man who was both physically and emotionally assaulted by a police officer for just walking on the street. I had to find that out from a very good community activist, Justin Allen. However, when council was informed about it, we were not told the specifics, except that the officer was a little aggressive. That was a huge disparity between what I saw and what I was told. I saw that officer when someone from the community, not from the Columbus Consolidated Government, from the community, asked me if I had seen this video. I hadn't. But as a 77-year-old African American who's been through the mill, who has been stopped countless times, thrown against my vehicle, not here in Columbus, but I know I'm safe here in Columbus. But when I leave out of Columbus and I'm stopped, my heart races. I start to sweat because I know that my safety is not in my hands anymore. And I know I'm at the prey of whoever comes to my vehicle. And if you look at the news, if you look at the history of what is done to people of color, you know the outcome is not in our hands. So it was a huge disparity about what I saw. And when I saw that officer do to this man, handcuffed to beating, and in addition, he was not only physically abused, he was traumatized emotionally. And this is my problem. I have lost faith and I shouldn't have. If I, as an elected official representing the citizens, are not told the complete truth, what about the citizens? And this just highlights why we need to have a Public Safety Advisory Commission with subpoena powers. I'm an elected official, and I was not told the truth of what happened. Okay, so let me get back to my notes. This ordinance is necessary so that we will know exactly, we can have individuals, citizens, regular citizens, they don't need to have any kind of law enforcement background. They know the difference between right and wrong. And I love Columbus, but my faith in the system has been shattered. Now, we are seeing in the news protests like we have never seen before in every city. I believe that when people saw George Floyd slowly murdered in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that it pricked the moral conscience of our nation to the conditions that people of color have endured for years. Like I said, I know I'm safe in Columbus, but when I'm stopped home in Philly, Chicago, Ohio, as I told you, my anxiety level raises because of the past history of such events. And Mr. Mayor, I want to tell you, I thank you for our conversation Friday because you were honest with me. And what I asked the mayor, and I gave him a simple example. I said, Mayor, you have not ever had to walk in the footsteps of a minority. And without hesitation, what he said, I can't imagine that. Well, Mr. Mayor, I understand that. And that's understandable. That's not anything difficult to understand. But you want to know something? When you look at television nationally, many of our white brothers and sisters who can imagine and can see and understand are locking arms with their brothers and sisters of color and being pepper sprayed, beaten, and jailed. Like I said, I believe we're on the cusp of some significant change, and this ordinance here in Columbus will be a part of it. So ladies, it's me that should be thanking you. I want to repeat that. This is me who should be thanking you. Because when I was 11 years of age, my grandmother sat me down and she taught me the do's and don'ts. If you are ever stopped, you be respectful. You make sure your hands are seen. No matter what is happening to you, you say yes, sir, and no, sir. No matter how you feel emotionally, what is done to you, do not show it on your face. I'm 77. I had to give that talk to my son who's watching. He works for the Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C. I had to give the talk to him, my grandson, and now we have great-grands. So I want to thank you, ladies, for the courageous step that you have, and I thank you for selecting me. It's I who should be thanking you for bringing. Representative Hughley, I want to thank you so much for your phone call and for your invitation. And so, this is a bold step in positive police procedures. And also I want to say up there, looking at CBD, what I mentioned to you yesterday is that I still got your back. I'm still going to be supportive. I appreciate you, respect you. That's why I left my wife who was having tests, because you mean that much to me that I know we don't agree. But it meant so much to me in my heart to speak to you so you can understand my position. And so there is one question that I'd like to ask, because my faith in the system has been shattered. And I want to know, like everyone here, that they know that City Council meets, has regularly scheduled meetings. And when something important comes up, we have a called meeting. I want to know why this council, representatives of the people, were not called, once we were told this officer was a little aggressive, why we were not either shown the film or told the truth about the beating of that man, handcuffed. And I'm, as an African American, but you want to say, this is any citizen it could have happened to. But as an African American, I'm so angry about that. One, because I was not told the truth about it. I had to have someone from the community call me and tell me to go on to Facebook and look under Justin Allen. And I want to thank Justin Allen. I don't know if he's here. And so I want that question answered. Why, a representative of the people, we weren't told? And when I say we, I'm talking about council. I'm not talking solely about me. I want to know. And this is what the community is asking. And that's why we're here. And that's why we need a Public Safety Advisory Commission with subpoena powers, because I'm not hearing anything. And ladies, I want to thank you again for bringing this to light. And you want to know something? This may be voted up or it may be voted down, but this is not the last time. This is not the last time that a request for this will happen. But my heart feels good, my soul feels good for doing it. Ms. Booker, I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Oh, that's quite all right.
And I beg your pardon.
That's fine. I enjoyed it. All I have to say is amen to what you just did. Council members, thank you so much for having us this afternoon. I'm here because I was told to come up here. But I want to say thank you, and we appreciate everything that you do. And I'm a member of a whole lot of organizations back here, and they're talking about age. Mr. Barnes, I think I got you beat.
You do, Ms. Booker.
All right. On August the 21st, I will be 98 years old. Woo! I am still working, and I will continue to work, especially if to help young people, old people, middle-aged people. Just call on me. And thanks so much for my sisters. Thank you. You look good.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Tonza Thomas, First Vice Chair of the Muskogee County Democratic Party, and I stand in solidarity with the sisters in the back. And I'm going to say it loud for the people in the back. I'm also in support of Councilor Barnes, as so often we've come before Council asking for a Public Safety Advisory Committee with subpoena power. In 2008, a few of you who are here now was offered the same thing, and many of you were in opposition. Mr. Mayor, you were a city council member at that time, and you were in opposition. In 2016, when I came before you as the president of the NAACP, I asked for the same. And then I came last month with my sisters from My Black Has a Purpose, and we asked you for the same, and no one opened their mouth. Today I stand before you with this headdress because many black women put on this headdress often when we're going to the funerals of our sons and our husbands. And I wondered, what would you think when I walked up in here with this? But there's a method to this madness. When you look at your citizens that come before you, do you block us out? Because tonight I wore my hater blocker. And I say that because elections have consequences. We elected you and we hold you accountable just like we hold the officers who are patrolling our city streets. Mr. Mayor, I will ask you the same question that Councilor Barnes did. When there's an issue, as the Public Safety Director-in-Chief, if an officer commits an offense against a citizen, why isn't it that you, Mr. Mayor, would bring city council members from District 1 through District 10 into a private meeting, because you meet regularly, when this is something that is so apparent that happens across this country? I would think as a citizen, I can go to bed at night knowing that my mayor and my city council members are doing what they need to be doing on my behalf. And I want to say this again. I am comfortable in my skin. Are you comfortable in yours? Again, elections have consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Hello, City Council. My name is Cheryl Walker. And on behalf of my daughter, Kayla Walker, and myself, I'm here in support of the resolution and the ordinance, Councilor Barnes. It's been a long time, but I support the ordinance. I support the Citizen Review Board, and I support them having subpoena power. It is something we have needed for 17 years, and something that we should have had, and I'm asking you today to approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
To the Honorable Mayor and to City Council and our illustrious City Manager and to all who compose this august body today. My name is Ralph Hewling, and I'm pastor of St. James Missionary Baptist Church. And first of all, I'm just glad that Marvin Broadwater was here too, so I wouldn't be the only mayor. But I want to say that I'm here to support Pop Barnes, Councilman Pop Barnes' ordinance and resolution. Victor Hugo said there's nothing better, there's nothing more powerful, not even an army whose idea has come, whose time for an idea has come. And as we look around our world today, we realize that the time for this idea has come, for us to be proactive rather than reactive. I look right 100 miles away from here, Atlanta City Council, just a few days ago, they approved a resolution of public safety reform banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation strategies, requiring a warning before shooting, exhausting all alternatives before shooting, having imposed a duty to intervene from other officers. In other words, other officers can't sit around and watch one officer do wrong and act like, hey, I had nothing to do with it. Banning shooting at moving vehicles, requiring use of force continuum, and requiring comprehensive reporting involving use of force against civilians. Let me just say this, I'm going to get out of your way. In another life, I used to be law enforcement. My undergrad degree is criminal justice, and I was a sergeant for the State Department of Corrections. And I was I guess you might call the one that went to capture inmates when they escaped from Jack T. Rutledge Prison. I was the K-9 sergeant. And that was an old practice that whenever we caught the inmate or whoever it was that had escaped, the old practice was whenever I caught them with the K-9, officers would beat them up while still in the woods. That was an old practice. Well, as K-9 sergeant, I'm in charge, and I say, listen, the person's punishment is that he has been caught and he is going back to prison. That's punishment enough. And so sometimes we've got to eliminate and eradicate old practices to move forward. And once again, the time for this idea has come. No indictment, on anything in the past, I think this would be just the perfect time while the transition of our new police chief is coming in for us to give citizens the transparency and involvement that is needed. Truth be told, you can't really expect, honestly, blue to police blue, because they're going to be partial, and we might as well face it. And so I come here today on behalf of many of the ministers in this community to support Pop Barnes and tell you thank you so very much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Reverend Ewing.
Good evening. My name is Taisha Bryant, and I stand before you on behalf of We Have a Purpose Incorporation and the Kings and Queen Foundation. We're standing in support of Pop Barnes. Also, with the reform, I really do believe in actually training the officers with more training, especially dealing with the mental health population. Many of times, situations are escalated. If officers are trained to de-escalate the situation and actually able to assess what's going on prior to the situation, I think it will actually work out better, and there will be less commotion, and there'll be less situations with the officers actually harming those who actually called them. Because many times officers get called on a call, and what usually happens is the person that is called, they actually ends up turning out bad for them as well. So anytime there's more training throughout before they actually get on the force and throughout the process or while they're on the force, training is very, very, very imperative. So again, I do stand with you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Byron Hickey. Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, Mr. City Attorney, members of council. I come before you today as a retired police detective with the Columbus Police Department for over 30 years in support of Councilman Barnes' ordinance on subpoena power for the Public Safety Advisory Commission. I currently serve on the Public Safety Advisory Commission as being appointed by Councilman Barnes. There will be some people come up here later to say that the members of this body is not qualified to decide whether or not something wrong has happened. I differ with that. I'm very qualified to do it because I did the work for over 30 years. I will start out by saying here today to everyone and to my former colleagues, I am pro-police. I'm pro-law enforcement. My wife still currently works with the police department as a police detective. I strongly feel that law enforcement is needed in our community. But what we don't need is misconduct by law enforcement. The use of excessive force by law enforcement will not be tolerated. This is unacceptable. This issue here before you today is not an attack on our law enforcement community. It's not an attack on y'all, not at all. But the issue here before you today has everything to do with supporting and everything to do with the moral obligations that when we see something is wrong, we need to speak up. Let me say that again. Our moral obligations that when we see something wrong, we need to speak up. And if we don't speak up, silence means consent. Let me say that again. When we don't speak up, silent means consent. What's amazing to me is when I was policing, president of the PBA, we would all get together to petition council for pay raises for law enforcement personnel. In doing so, we would go out asking the public for their support. And we would get that support from the public to give us pay raises. But when it comes to this issue here today, the public can't get any support from the law enforcement community. That troubles me. When a law enforcement officer do something good, we need to praise him. By the same token, when they do something wrong, like this issue here before you today, it is unacceptable and they need to be held accountable. And if we are this great city with this great law enforcement community, this shouldn't be an issue for anybody. Because if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. But if we're great, and by passing this ordinance sponsored by Councilman Barnes, we can be even better. Council people, we can be even better. So let's be the model for other cities and communities across the nation. Let's be that model. But if we're saying that this type of behavior that we're here about today, someone being assaulted and beaten in handcuffs, if we're saying that this is an accepted practice by our law enforcement community, we're not progressing, we're regressing. We're regressing. Let me say it again, we're not progressing, we're regressing. As a member of the Public Safety Advisory Commission, we're not asking for arrest powers. We're requesting the right to review complaints and investigate investigations stemming from these complaints, but the mere response and reaction from the request is an indicator that something is needed in this community. The way that they are responding to this tells you something is needed in this community. So I say to our city government is not owned by private organizations. The city employees are paid by the citizens who are taxpayers in this community. Therefore, we are obligated to answer to the citizens of this community. In closing, I would like to say, this is about transparency, this is about honesty, and this is about accountability. Thank you for hearing me, and thank you, and may the blessing of God continue to shine upon each of you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and City Attorney. I'm Toya Tucker. Behind me, I have Takara Hemingway and Shamika Avery and Miss Kathy Blight. I stand before you today as a citizen and a voter. And I stand with you today and with my sisters in solidarity and I'm sorry. I want to let you know what the benefits of police oversight really means. Police oversight can be a benefit not only to the individual who has the complaint, but also the larger community, the police, and the sheriff's departments, and even elected and appointed officials. The actual benefits that occur depend on how well the involved groups work together and the type of model implemented. Some potential benefits are complaints are given a place to voice concerns outside of the law enforcement. Oversight can help hold the police or sheriff's department accountable for officers' actions. Oversight agencies can help improve the quality of the department's internal investigations and alleged misconduct. The community at large can be reassured that discipline is being imposed when appropriate, while also increasing the transparency of the disciplinary process. When the oversight agency confirms a complaint's allegations, complainants may feel validated. And similarly, when the oversight agency exonerates an officer, the officer may feel vindicated. So we stand here in solidarity with the women that came before us to let you know, I'm gonna let them speak afterwards, but to let you know, Mayor, we want transparency and accountability. I'm not only a voter and a constituent, but I will soon be a colleague of yours. And I just want to let you know this is what I support. I stand with Pop Barnes, and I stand with all those who will vote yes for this. And I'm asking you to consider, even if you're on the fence of a no vote, consider let's revisiting the 2008 time frame when Atlanta came down and gave you all training. Because I know Mayor Skip Henderson, you were involved, and I'm quite sure Mayor Pro Tem Mayor Gary Allen was involved as well. You know, this is not about us against them. I am a Back the Blue. I'm a co-chair of my Neighborhood Watch Committee. I care about officers. I'm a former military person, so I understand the camaraderie that comes with being in a uniform. I understand that. However, we have to understand that the citizens' voices should be heard at this moment. And we need to stand up. We need to stand on the right side of history right now. Everywhere across America, we are seeing people, we are seeing councils vote yes. We are seeing change. And it's not us against you at all. It's not, officers. I love you. Seriously. I would do anything for you. As your councilwoman-elect for District 4, you can call me if you have an issue. I will be by your side. But I'm also going to be by the citizen side as well. Because that's what a counselor should do. So let's do the right thing right now, Mayor Henderson and council. Let's do the right thing. And I just ask, if you are on the fence with the no, let's revisit and bring Atlanta down. And bring them down, and let's do training. Let's have further talks about this if you're on the fence. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shamika Averett. On January 4, 2016, my daughter, brother, and mother were murdered here in Rebuttal, Georgia. And I don't believe that crime would have been solved without the Columbus Police Department. They did an absolutely wonderful job, not only tracking down the juveniles that did it, but bringing all three of them to justice. And I applaud you for that. That may have been one of the hardest days in your career, to walk into a home, and I can't even imagine what you had to endure if you remember that day. And I know a lot of you in this community remember that day. I could never forget it. I remember it every day of my life. So as Toya just said, I'm 100% behind the Columbus Police Department, because I believe had it not been for you, that crime may have never been solved. This is not a CSI thing, because we look at TV and we think that if DNA is there, it's solved. But it was not an easy case to solve. And I thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know that I'm standing here today in my right mind because of you guys and what you did and the crime that you solved that year. And I'm forever grateful for that. On May 28th, 2020, my brother would have been 22 years old. So in the post I said, one of the last things I said was, we kill us, they kill us. And it wasn't a jab at anybody, it was just the truth. And the next day I went on Facebook and I said, well, can we do a peaceful protest here in Columbus in honor of George Floyd, mask on, social distancing? And I didn't know the overwhelming support that I would get from that. I joined forces with Takara Hemingway and Toya Tucker. And if you remember that day, it was one of the most successful, peaceful rallies that we have had in Columbus, Georgia in recent years. Thousands of people came out. No one arrested, no one injured. It was a beautiful day, and I was proud to say that I'm a citizen of Columbus, Georgia on that day. And I'm still proud to say that. But we do have some work to do. We have some work to do. And I'm here today in support of City Councilman Pops Barnes and the resolution and the ordinance, I'm sorry. And I'm here today in support of every citizen that may come in contact with a police officer. I've only had good interactions with police officers, but I know what it's like to be the mother of a murdered child. My daughter was 10 years old when she lost her life to a senseless, violent crime here in Columbus. So when those ladies said that George Floyd was calling out to his mother, I can relate, because I know what that grief feels like. And out of that grief, I put that post on Facebook, and out of that grief came a successful rally, and out of that, I would want to believe that's one of the reasons why we're here today. We are a community. I love this community, and I've thought about walking away from Columbus many days, because everywhere I look, I see my family. Everywhere I look, I see my mother, I see my brother, I see my daughter. She went to North Columbus Elementary. She would be going to the 10th grade. And so I'm standing here before you in just awe of the fact that we could all come together and hopefully want the same thing. And I'm standing here with these ladies because my black has a purpose. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Sabrick.
To the mayor and councilmen and women, thank you again for having us. As the founders of My Black Has a Purpose, we do stand in support with Pop Barnes and the rest of the ladies and the ordinance that has been presented here today. The Citizens Review Board with subpoena power is not only about, or is not about us against them. It is extremely disappointing that some fellow citizens would rather spread fear using fake narratives and disinformation than join in and support the call for a Citizens Review Board, excuse me, which will be very helpful in building a bridge, bringing citizens and law enforcement closer together. All citizens are not the same, nor do they have the same experience, nor do they have the same confidence level when it comes to the police policing the police. Passing this ordinance and establishing this review board with subpoena power will help to address the concerns of those citizens and help to focus on what we need to do in order to ensure that our citizens here in this city are safe. The focus should be on the citizens making the request, not the citizens that already have oversight. The board would not be a threat to those citizens fundamentally opposed to it, nor clash with it or any of the currently existing oversight of law enforcement they point in oppression. As My Black Has a Purpose, and it's really, really important that people understand that we are not just about police reform and policing the police, but we understand too that there is a bigger problem and that we have to speak up and speak out against the violence that's plaguing our world against each other. And like Toya said earlier, to the Columbus Police Department, we do appreciate you. We do back you, and we always will. We just stand with everybody else, and we just want things done in the proper way. We feel that we're the catalyst in moving and putting the request for the Citizens Review Board and bringing it in front of the council when we did the Tuesday after the march, after June 6th. But again, we thank you all so very much for hearing us on this evening, and we hope you vote yes, because our Black has a purpose.
Thank you, ladies.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Allen. Today I don't represent any organizations, any clubs, businesses. I'm simply here as a resident of Columbus, Georgia, and if I had to represent anyone, it would be those citizens that don't come to city council members, that aren't regularly visited by city council members, that live in areas where people are afraid to frequent. I think Pop Barnes mentioned the video, and we haven't even seen the full video. I would like to see the full video, because that officer that punched that black man, if I'm understanding correctly, he was a training officer. And to my understanding, that video goes a little bit further with them getting into the car and that training officer expressing some details that are disheartening, to say the least. I don't really see what the issue would be with providing citizens the power to subpoena documents that are necessary to ensure that we are safe, to ensure that officers that are abusing their powers are handled correctly and aren't being given punishments for promotions. We could peel back a lot of covers of what's going on within our city. I think in every city there's good and there's bad. I don't blame any one of you particularly. At some point in time, I've had the pleasure of meeting each of you, and I think that you all are pretty decent people. But it's time to get beyond being decent for just ourselves and our own communities and for what benefits us. But it's time for us to be decent for those that have no voice, for those that don't have a recognizable last name or face, for those that don't necessarily come from good stock, because I wasn't even the first person to post a video. Shout out to Gadget Jackson for that. And he actually had more views than I did, but I just believe that because of who I may be and who my family is, it stirred a little bit more. Because why is he posting something like that against the city? Why is he saying these things? Somebody call somebody and tell him to be quiet. I refuse to believe that my grandfather would have been quiet. And I refuse to believe that if he was to come up here today, or my father, or any one of my uncles, that anything less than full attention would be given. So I stand before you here today in full support of the ordinance and resolution presented by Pop Barnes. And whether y'all approve it or not, we will continue to show the truth of what's going on right here in Columbus, Georgia. And for anyone that may have questions or concerns for me directly, my phone number is 706-464-7886. Thank you all, and I hope y'all have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Hello, Council, Mayor Henderson. My name is Harry Underwood. I reside in District 6, and I'm testifying in support of the ordinance and resolution as brought forward by Councilman Barnes. The reason why, and I'm going to speak from the perspective of the LGBT community, and especially Black LGBT people here in Columbus and nationwide. A 2013 Williams Institute survey found that 48% of LGBTQ victims of violence reportedly experienced police misconduct. The 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey found that 58% of respondents who interacted with police who knew they were transgender experienced mistreatment, including verbal harassment, persistent misgendering, physical sexual assault, and being forced to perform sexual acts to avoid arrest. Nearly half of transgender survey respondents said that they felt uncomfortable seeking police assistance. Some people probably wouldn't be surprised by this, and others may feel shocked or dismissive, and it is a frightening prospect to accept that if you trust the police to keep people safe. So I testify in support of this because, especially for Black LGBT people and especially Black trans women, when we already face hostility from within our own communities and everything, domestic interactions which are hostile, the last thing we need is for our police to also conduct to commit misconduct against Black LGBT people and everything, and against their person, and against and we need a means by which we can hold the police to account, because the police are the closest manifestation of the purpose and the utility of government in our everyday lives, more than the federal government, more than the state government. And I believe that a citizen review board with subpoena power can help in that regard, especially for Black LGBT people in this community of Columbus, Georgia. I believe that we deserve that. I believe that we need to hold power accountable, and I support this ordinance and resolution as brought forward by Councilman Barnes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Mr. City Attorney.
Okay, Mayor, is there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak in favor of this proposal? All right. If you would, anybody opposed to this proposal, come on forward and give us your name and address, please.
And we forgot to remind the other individuals that came forward, but they all did give their name. Please just give your name and your address before your comments.
Yes, sir. My name is Alton Russell. I'm live at 1425 Autumn Ridge Drive in Columbus. First is I'm not president of any national or international organization. What I am is a proud resident of Columbus, Georgia. Now, as a sideline, I do serve right now as chairman of the Columbus-Muskogee County Republican Party. I'm here today to ask you, and first I want to tell you I really appreciate everything y'all do, but my purpose is to voice my opposition to the Public Safety Advisory Commission, committee, board, whatever it may be, with subpoena powers. I'm not concerned with anything to do with the police department or anything that's been mentioned in any shape, form, or fashion, but for the city council and the mayor to give an appointed board of any kind subpoena powers is not right. You know, what it does, it gives away your authority. Right now, our police department is accountable because I think, if I understand it right, the police chief is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. The police department is accountable and responsible to the council right now. And I think the council has subpoena powers to do something if something's not right. Y'all can do it. Now, whether it's done or not, I don't know. I don't know that it is or it is not. But, you know, we also have a grand jury. We also have the GBI. We also have attorney generals that have subpoena powers. And so there is a way to do the things that this committee would do, except for the fact that all these people are elected. And the elected people should have the responsibility to make sure that everything is done properly. We do not and should not give up the authority and the power of subpoena power from the council to any appointed board. And you know, who could be appointed? Well, you know, anybody could be appointed. I don't even know how you go about appointing somebody. You know, if every council member had 5 people, that's a lot of folks on the board. If you only had one person to appoint, well, you know, how these people and who they are that are appointed are probably going to be great people, but they should not, under any circumstances, have subpoena power. Now, you know, this process is not perfect, but I think Councilman Barnes mentioned the fact about Mr. Floyd. Well, you know, Mr. Floyd That situation was absolutely terrible. I mean, there's no way you can say anything about it except it was bad. Now, he used the word it was a murder. Well, you know, okay. But the thing is, if I remember right, and I have kept up with it a little bit, the police officer was fired, and he faces criminal charges in the judicial system exactly where it should be, not anywhere else, not to an advisory committee with any kind of subpoena powers. So I'm asking you, if you will, to vote no. And I'm basically want you to make sure you understand that I'm not saying that there's anything except my opposition is subpoena powers. I cannot see how that should go on to subpoena powers by a appointed board. That just not fly. Does not make any sense to me. I appreciate your time. Appreciate everything y'all do. Again, I would ask you to vote no on this committee with subpoena powers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Nice to meet you. I'm here to, well, let me start over. My name is Brad Peters. I don't live in Columbus, but I work here every day, so I live here in a way. But I am here in disagreement to the ordinance, and that no one in the public eye or in the public in general should not have the decision-making power over our police department, and that they are the ones that are sitting up there, and the ones that are not in uniform are the ones that I consider my friends. And the way it is that no one should have a decision over life or death. It's not like it's what happened to George Floyd was wrong. It was terrible. It was horrible. I was very sad that day when I heard about it. But I am against this ordinance, and I hope y'all vote no on this, and that everything, well, it's not really not everything. It's just that I think that no one should ever have power over anyone in a way. No one should have to look over everyone. It's just like the, let me look at my notes. It's like the rules of engagement that during the last administration. No one should have a decision on who says what is allowed for the police to do. How are they going to handle one person that is being disruptive? How are they going to arrest them? How are they going to handle them? It shouldn't be that way, in my own opinion. And I hope y'all vote no, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. First of all, I want to appreciate y'all for y'all time and allowing us citizens to speak openly about this important issue. My name is Michael B. Jackson, and first off, I want to thank our police officers, men and women who are out here risking their lives serving our community each and every day. Unfortunately, I've been on the other side as far as being having a criminal record. So, and I can contest from personal experience of the some mistreatment, but unfortunately, what we don't understand is you don't fight your battles in the street; you fight your battles in the court. And these police officers have they have a sworn duty before all of us and they're being held at a higher standard, which people they clearly dismiss. That's why I'm here to implore y'all to vote no, because we don't need more police policing the police. They've been forced to wear body cameras and things of that nature, which will cause them to have to be watched or micromanaged to a degree where it actually impels them from doing their job thoroughly. But at the same time, we should know that what y'all are proposing is going to cause more confusion, and it really takes away the purpose of y'all jobs. That's y'all job to make sure that these individuals who have to stand before you and swear under the guidelines to uphold the law, that y'all hold them accountable. And so I'm just here today to, like I said, to make sure y'all understand that the purpose of y'all job, and that's to make sure that we don't need more confusion in this already very volatile situation. So I thank you, Mayor, for your time, and I'm asking y'all council members to vote no. I mean, that's pretty much it. Have a blessed day, and God bless y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much for having all of us to be able to speak. And Pop Barnes, you know, I'm Eve Tidwell. I love you dearly, and I believe your heart is in the right place with what you're looking for and thinking about. But nobody that isn't already a police officer knows what they have to go through, the millions of variables that take place, that they have to make these instantaneous decisions. If a policeman's just beating on somebody and somebody else doesn't stop them, another officer, yes, that has to get looked at by everyone. But that's not the majority. That is less than 1% of the crimes that are going on out there. So why don't we put that same money into protecting our police officers and starting to educate our criminals to take it easy and to stop being criminals and to stop doing all the things they're doing? The people that are standing in the face of those policemen in these riots, not protests, what we had in Columbus that Saturday was absolutely fantastic, and it is going to cause change of every kind. But what we're seeing on the streets right now is riots, and the police have to get it all under control, because we can't do it, and we can't tie their arms behind their backs while they're trying to do it. We have to give them clear rules of engagement, as someone said, and make sure that those rules are okayed by everyone before they're taught them. Now, for a council to just go, okay, you can't do this anymore after they've been trained to do it at the split second, that's going to take, how long do they train to be able to have that muscle memory to do something? They're going to have to train that long to get it out of them. So before everybody just starts making a bunch of rules about how they have to act, we should make some more rules about how our society should act and behave and not do so many crimes. Thank you. I'm not going to say I'm against it or for it, because I dearly love you. I'm going to say that we have to protect our police officers who protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tidwell.
Good evening. I'm a people person. I never felt happier to be more than 15 feet away from people so I can breathe. My name is Lance LaRusso. I have an office here in Columbus. I'm an attorney, and my office is over on Broadway. I wanted to speak with you a moment tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I want to let you know a little bit about my perspective. I've been practicing law since 1999, and that's why, as a lawyer, I brought all my notes. I've been a sworn law enforcement officer since 1987. I've been a post-firearms instructor for 29 years. I've been a post-defensive tactics instructor, a taser instructor. I'm a use of force expert and have testified in court as such. I'm an adjunct professor at a Georgia university, teaching law enforcement officers. I've personally lectured to over 10,000 officers and federal agents from over 30 states and 9 countries. I've been a street cop, I've been a trainer, a hostage negotiator, and a police academy instructor. I have spent countless hours researching and reviewing use of force encounters, police tactics, dissecting deadly force encounters between police and citizens, and studying research about the use of force, not anecdotes, research, hard research, research using accelerometers to see how fast subjects move, to actually see how people react when they're under stress. Studies that were done in the United States and elsewhere. I've worked with officers who were disabled in the line of duty by actively resisting suspects. I will tell you about two of them. One was an officer who was 35 years old who had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. He was assaulted by an unarmed assailant who was a shoplifter, who beat his head into the concrete sidewalk so he could avoid arrest. That man is permanently disabled. His wife had to quit her job to be his full-time caregiver. Another was an officer who was forced to shoot a man and later found out the gun was unloaded. He was so profoundly affected by that situation that he became permanently disabled with crippling PTSD. I've written books and articles about use of force encounters and how they are perceived in the media. No use of force, however lawful, will ever look good on a video. And when all you are doing is looking at videos and making decisions, you will make the wrong decision. I've now represented 99 law enforcement officers who've been involved in officer-involved shootings or in custody deaths. I've sat with these officers after they've done what they were sworn to do in clear use of force that was 100% justified, and watched them fall apart and pray for forgiveness because they had to choose between going home to their families or being buried with their family at their side. I'm the General Counsel for the Georgia Fraternal Order of Police of nearly 5,000 members. And that is the background I bring to you today. And I want to talk to you about a situation that happened I had firsthand knowledge of. And it really speaks to the good efforts and the goals and desires of people, but sometimes they can be misleading. And sometimes they can be misdirected. A very good friend of mine was a security director for Georgia Pacific, and he had a whole group of protesters show up outside there one day, and they were protesting and screaming and hollering, and he said, well, what do y'all want? They said, we're not leaving here, and they were students mainly, students and professors, environmentalists. Said, we are not leaving here today until Georgia Pacific agrees to plant 1 million trees. And he said, done, that demand is met. And they said, you have the authority to do that? He said, we're a tree company. We were going to plant 50 million next year, but if you want us to cut back to 1 million, we'll do that. Even the best of intentions, when they are misguided, lead to bad outcomes. And make no mistake, Columbus is at a crossroads. Your trust is being strained between the police department and the citizens of this great city. The misinformation about law enforcement use of force is rampant, and in some cases, disinformation is being spread deliberately. I'd like to address the facts to allow the decisions that you make to be from positions of strength. There are problems with this ordinance. There are problems with giving the commission subpoena power. I am opposed to this proposal, and I can tell you that the men and women of the Columbus Police Department will be worse off if they don't leave and go work somewhere else if you pass this ordinance. So let's talk a little bit about facts, because we've heard about the facts and getting to the facts. So a great deal of research is done on law enforcement use of force, and it is amazing to me that I see people show up that have no experience in this area that speak from authority because they just want something changed. You may have never heard of Ronald Fryer. Ronald Fryer is a tenured professor at Harvard. He's a pretty smart guy. He's one of the youngest tenured individuals ever at Harvard University. He's an economist. He wrote an article called An Empirical Analysis of Racial Differences in Police Use of Force. And he studied over 1,000 police shootings in 10 major departments in Texas, Florida, and California. And he wrote, on the most extreme use of force, officer-involved shootings, we find no racial differences in either raw data or when contextual factors are taken into account. For instance, in Houston, Texas, he found that blacks are 23.8% less likely to be shot at by police relative to whites. In Houston, Texas, Hispanics are 8.5% less likely to be shot at police than white suspects. He called it the most surprising result of his career. this study came to national forefront, and then a picture surfaced of Dr. Fryer, who's African American, and the study disappeared from the news. New York Post started doing studies on officer-involved shootings and started aggregating data. In 2015, law enforcement officers shot and killed 965 people. If you look at that number, it's always under 1,000. It has not moved. That needle has not moved very much in the past 10 or 15 years. What we have seen is that the people that law enforcement officers are dealing with are far more violent today than they were 10 or 15 years ago. Now let's put that 965 in context. According to the FBI, law enforcement officers make 12 to 13 million custodial arrests a year. The average is that about 1/3 of law enforcement officers are assaulted in the line of duty every year, and there are close to 1 million of them in the United States. For every officer that makes an arrest, there's 6 to 10 encounters with the citizens. That's 66 to 110 million law enforcement citizen encounters every year, 12 to 13 million arrests on average, and 965 people are killed every year by law enforcement. Law enforcement use of force is not the problem in the United States. In 75% of those situations, the 965, the cops were either under attack themselves or defending civilians. Throughout the United States, the standard for the use of deadly force is the officer can protect themselves, a third party, or stop a forcible felony. In the majority of the situations, the suspects were brandishing weapons, suicidal or mentally troubled, or bolted when ordered to surrender. The New York Post also looked at the narrative of white officers shooting unarmed black suspects. That accounted for less than 4% of those 965. Less than 4% of the 965, but we have to look at that in the context of today's news. Because unarmed in the news, unarmed in these data aggregation services means no gun. Unarmed in these statistics that you see all the time means no gun. When we go back into these data, we see, in these data sets, we see one person in that study had a shovel or a rake he was swinging at an officer. No one would dispute that's a deadly weapon. No one would dispute that deadly force was an appropriate response. In another year, in 2018, to give you an idea of the violence being perpetrated against officers, 9 officers were killed in vehicular assaults. Now, I was doing an interview with a reporter, and the reporter said, "You mean like traffic accidents, like a pedestrian?" I said, "No, someone ran over a law enforcement officer because they were wearing a uniform." There was another study done by Shane and Swenson. It's a book available on Amazon. It's called Unarmed and Dangerous: Patterns of Threats by Citizens During Deadly Force Encounters with Police. And we've gotten into this belief that if someone doesn't have a gun, they're not dangerous, which couldn't be further from the truth. They found that unarmed suspects were attempting to disarm, drown, strangle officers, or acting as if they were armed. For these aggregation studies, they found that unarmed meant no gun, but they were armed with knives, metal-tipped broomsticks, bear spray, rocks, vehicles, and tree branches. And when they looked at unarmed fatalities by officer-involved shootings, they found that 95% of the people that were shot were male. 40% were white, and 38% were black. 90% of the unarmed suspects at the time they were shot presented an active or potentially lethal or severely injurious threat to law enforcement at the time the use of force was used. There is an undeniable truth in all of these statistics. Over and over and over again, we see that the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers' use of force, including deadly force, starts with unlawful and active resistance by a subject who is being placed under arrest. When an officer tells someone they're under arrest, in our society, there is only one lawful response. and that is to submit to the officer's authority and allow yourself to be placed in custody. Fighting, wrestling with the officer, running are all crimes under Georgia law and every other state. There was another study done in Ohio, 2009 and through 2012. It was a university study. And each one of those years, 120 black males were killed each year by police use of force. 120. Remember, we used that 965, just under 1,000. 162 black males were killed each of those 4 years, on average, in justifiable homicides by citizens acting in self-defense. But this next number is why we need every good law enforcement officer supported in our communities. On average, in those 4 years, 4,166 black males were killed in criminal homicides, which were murders or manslaughters. There were no journalists investigating those homicides. There were no commission members investigating those homicides. And with all due respect, there were no council members investigating those homicides. Those homicides were investigated by law enforcement officers going into communities that people wouldn't go on a bet with their doors locked and their windows rolled up to investigate someone who killed a stranger and took a stranger's life. There is also an incredible amount of misinformation and disinformation that is shared. There are studies that are done that will explain why someone's shot in the back. A suspect can turn 90 degrees in 0.3 seconds. It takes longer than that for the officer to even perceive a change in the suspect's orientation. A person with their hand down with a gun at their side, not actively pointing it at the officer, can raise the gun and fire 3 times before an officer who is ready to fire can fire once. That is one of the reasons why officers are trained to use force in a certain manner. And that is one of the reasons why the people who investigate the use of force need to be similarly trained. There's a case called Graham versus Connor out of the United States Supreme Court. It was issued in 1989, and there's a few things in that case, and they're just studying law enforcement use of force. And they say that officers are often placed in rapidly evolving, tense circumstances that are uncertain. And they say that officers should not be judged in hindsight from the safety of the judge's courtroom. And the most important thing they talk about for your perspective and this issue before you is that officers should be judged as a reasonable officer, not a reasonable person, because officers have more information than the average person. This video that we heard about, it was a gentleman who was standing in the roadway. He was told to get out of the roadway. He argued with the officer and said, "That's not a law." It is a law. He was asked to move out of the roadway so his information could be obtained. And he refused. So he's taken into custody. And when he was taken into custody, he refused to open his hand. And I'm going to give you an example of Graham versus Connor. Because a person refusing to open their hands doesn't mean much to most people. It may mean the person has drugs on them. Law enforcement learns that. It may be they're just being uncooperative. But a person with a closed hand can present a threat, because law enforcement officers are taught that that closed hand could have a box cutter in it. And an officer that I worked pretty closely with had his jaw and face opened up from his ear down to past his carotid artery by somebody holding one of these. When we talk about errors and we talk about culpability, law enforcement officers that you send out here, they're going to make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, their actions should be judged, and they should be determined whether they need training or discipline by the people that train them and by the officers that oversee them every day. Because there is such a thing as a mistake of the head as opposed to a mistake of the heart. There are problems and issues with this proposed ordinance from a state law perspective. For instance, the Columbus Police Department and this council and this commission have absolutely no authority whatsoever to see that somebody's certification is revoked by post. You can put it in all the ordinances you want and all the commission statements and all the memoranda. It's a state agency and you have no authority over it. Psychological evaluations are done pre-hire and done as recommended. Not hiring anyone who has been fired or resigned while under investigation sounds fantastic. Well, let's look at that national database for a minute. You can't get licensed in one state without that state's Peace Officer Standards and Training Council going to the state you came from and asking questions and asking for your file and doing an investigation. That is the way this system works. There's actually an International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training. And I don't expect everyone to know this, but that's the problem when you have folks putting these things into ordinances and they're not exactly sure of how things work. Now, so far as not hiring anyone who's been fired from an agency, I want to give you an example. The Peace Officer Standards and Training Council does an investigation every time somebody is terminated. They resign in lieu of termination. They resign while under investigation. They're demoted for cause. They're arrested for any reason. They're suspended for more than 30 days. It's a one-year process, and it's very detailed. So let me tell you some of the reasons I have seen officers terminated, because Georgia is an at-will employment state. You can be terminated because the chief doesn't like the way you wore your collar brass. If you think that doesn't happen, I'm really sorry to inform you it happens all the time. I'm going to give you some examples of people that have been fired. A police chief who refused to hire 2 convicted felons that a city council member wanted him to hire. Refused. And the chief was fired. People who were fired, my clients who were fired from small town departments because they were black, or they were white, or they were gay, or they were transgender. Those people were fired unlawfully. Are you going to ban them from working from the city of Columbus? Other people who were fired because they were whistleblowers to impropriety. People who complained about unlawful employment tactics or raised concern about not having overtime. And several officers who were fired because they promoted or supported the wrong candidate with a yard sign in their yard. This ordinance talks about investigating excessive force complaints. Well, that's like taking a guilty person and letting a jury find them guilty. Every use of force should be investigated. And you should be proud to know that the Columbus Police Department does investigate every use of force by a law enforcement officer. And not just to see if they did something wrong, but to see if they can up their game, if they can get better, if their training works, if there's new training out there that can be used. And that use of force and investigation, all of that review by the chain of command is subject to your review and your community's review under the Georgia Open Records Act. So far as body cameras malfunction. I've seen them happen over and over again. No matter how good you think they are, no matter how much you pay for them, they will malfunction. And the simple act of slapping your chest to turn on that body camera before you get out of the car on a hot call could cause an officer to be placed in jeopardy because they're not focused on what they should be focused on, the tactics they were trained to use and the threats that may be in front of them or another citizen. We talk about de-escalation and implicit bias. Well, they've been required under Georgia law for 2 years. We also have a great deal of misconceptions about what de-escalation is. De-escalation is an outcome, it's not a tactic. And I'll give you an example. If I stop someone on the side of the road and they're twice my size, and they're getting violent, I can de-escalate all I want. But if something doesn't happen in their heart and their mind and make them stop resisting, there will be no de-escalation. Officers must intervene if something unlawful is being done. That's already against the law. It's already against post-council guidelines. It's a violation of law enforcement standards. And then we have this issue of chokeholds. First of all, the word chokehold is a misnomer. A chokehold that causes someone to have their air taken away by crushing their larynx is illegal. A lateral vascular neck restraint, which is used by martial artists and is used in competitions, is taught in some police academies. It's not taught in most academies in Georgia. And most departments will tell you that given the choice between deadly force and a lateral vascular neck restraint that makes someone go to sleep, it does not cut off all the blood flow to their brain. It's a misnomer. They would rather have them not shoot someone. I had a very good friend who was wrestling with someone who had a box cutter in his hand, been a law enforcement officer for a long time, very good shape, and was being overpowered by this gentleman who was reaching for a box cutter. At that point, he had two choices. Very close contact, he could have pulled his gun out and shot the man in the back of the head. Instead, he used a lateral vascular neck restraint that he learned in martial arts classes and then handcuffed the man, and the man came back to, and there was no further injury. In addition, with all of these regulations you're putting in place, you need to look at OCGA 17-4-20 subsection D. No law enforcement agency of this state or any political subdivision of this state shall adopt or promulgate any rule, regulation, or policy which prohibits a peace officer from using that degree of force to apprehend a suspected felon which is allowed by the statutory and case law of this state. This council cannot limit the amount of force that a law enforcement officer can use if it is permitted by the state of Georgia. When I read this committee, the Public Safety Advisory Committee ordinances, it's not an oversight committee, it's advisory. This ordinance is wholly inconsistent with the enabling legislation and the mission of the commission. In the introduction, it says a close relationship between public safety personnel and the community is an essential part of a responsive and responsible consolidated government. The Columbus Council believes that the creation of a Public Safety Advisory Commission is a desirable step in ensuring valuable input from citizens and information exchange concerning the provision of public safety services. The mission of this commission is very clear. The Public Safety Advisory Commission is to recommend resources, public safety practices and policies, and citizens' responsibilities needed to achieve a safe community to the mayor, the Columbus Council, and our public safety departments. When we talk about respecting the civil rights of all and training to reflect, as we heard some of the speakers say, part of that training needs to be stop fighting with our law enforcement officers. Stop attacking our law enforcement officers. The duties of the commission shall strive to create a climate of mutual respect and partnership between the community and public safety departments, which helps achieve safety, order, and justice for all citizens. Turning this commission into an oversight committee, which I think exceeds their authority under the ordinance, is not going to foster a climate of mutual respect and partnership. There's other problems with subpoena power. You have investigations that are being done by the GBI. You have people speaking while an investigation's going on. Subpoenas can force people to speak. Those people are witnesses. They should not be speaking until the investigation's done. The other thing that you may not realize is law enforcement agencies have the authority to force officers to tell them what happened under a case called Garrity. And that information can't be used against them in court because the Supreme Court decided it was more important to get that information from officers so we could make our police departments better. That commission, if they start acting as an investigative body, has no protection under Garrity. So I'm going to give you a scenario that I deal with all the time. You have an officer who is cleared in an officer use of force, a deadly force situation where the suspect dies. They're cleared by the GBI, they're cleared by the Internal Affairs, they're cleared by the Department of Justice, and cleared by the grand jury, but if it's a homicide, the statute of limitations on murder is still open for the life of the officer. You may be able to subpoena them, but they probably won't testify for you because they're placed in jeopardy every time they make a statement. And that will create more distrust in this community when it's reported that an officer appeared before your council under subpoena and pled the fifth. I question where the authority of a commission like this to issue subpoenas would even come from. Your Personnel Review Board can issue subpoenas. That's because they are partially a creation of the legislature. There has to be enabling legislation in order for a personnel board to be created. And when we talk about oversight, true oversight, your grand juries are oversights. In 2016, I helped author a bill that changed 17752, which is the grand jury statute in Georgia. We added a civil grand jury level to the grand jury statute. So DAs could present cases, and the grand jury, the conscience of the community, could say, refer this for prosecution. You can close your investigation or do more investigation. But we put something else in, and this was FOP-driven legislation. We put something in to say, if you're going to review those cases, they must be recorded by a court reporter, and then they must be available for the public to read. So there is transparency. Columbus is at a crossroads. I understand that when good people see problems, they want to fix them by exercising control quickly. They reach out to something they can control and say, if we do this, it'll just make things better. And you heard some of that from the speakers. We have to do something. Your law enforcement officers are dedicated individuals. Some of them are youth pastors, Little League coaches, Sunday school teachers, foster parents. They are dedicated servants. I want you to think for a second, when you watched the news and you saw officers being pelted with rocks, being pelted with bricks, being shot at across this country, did you look at your children and your family members and neighbors and say you'd be out of your mind to go into this profession? Well, there they are. And yesterday and today they showed up for work, and you know what? They're going to be there tomorrow. And for that, they deserve the respect of everyone here. All people deserve to be treated with respect, including your officers. Quick legislation never works in the long run. If you pass this ordinance, you will have problems. If nothing else, you will have legal challenges, and you may also have a mass exodus for officers trying to find someone else to work. Your Columbus police officers are well trained. There's a 90% drop in recruiting in the United States. They can go work wherever they want. They choose to work here. Wait and take the time to review these proposed actions. There's no good start with bad legislation. Take the road less traveled, and it will make all the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
Mr. Mayor, Council, other city leaders, I certainly appreciate what you do here for our city and our citizens. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak before you today, and I will certainly try to be brief, and I know many of you know me and know that that sometimes can be difficult. I will do my very, very best. Mr. LaRusso is a highly intelligent man, and he spoke about a lot of statistics and a lot of information that is relevant not only in Columbus, Georgia, but also all across the country. What I'm here to speak to you about is how all of this information is relative to our police officers, these men and women that you see up here, and the ones that aren't here, the ones that are out on the street right now, servicing calls, trying to keep this city safe. I think it's very important that all of us understand and that our citizens understand, because I am convinced, based on my personal experience and based on the experience and the information that I receive from my people every single day, that some of our citizens are misinformed and they don't truly understand what it is we do, how we do it, and the way we get it done. So let me just give you a little background on myself. I've been a Columbus police officer for almost 20 years. I started off as a patrolman. I then went to the motor unit and was a traffic officer and a fatality investigator, where I worked multiple traffic accident deaths, and to include child deaths and many, many others. As I was appointed to the rank of corporal, I was moved upstairs to the robbery and homicide division, where I spent the next 10, 11 years investigating violent crime up and to include homicide. I did that for a significant amount of time. I stayed there as I made the rank of sergeant. I stayed in that particular unit and just went to a different squad. And then when the homicide squad was created, I was one of the first and founding members of the new homicide unit. So I've spent a tremendous amount of time dealing with violent crimes in this city. I've spent a lot of time dealing with our citizens all across this city in every facet and under some very difficult situations. As I made the rank of lieutenant, I was moved back down to the patrol division as a shift lieutenant, where I spent almost exactly 1 year as a shift lieutenant and a assistant shift commander, and then went over to the motor unit, back to the motor unit, where I'm currently the motor squad and traffic unit lieutenant. I have under my control the only proactive police units assigned to the Bureau of Patrol Services. So if you see the motor guys riding around on their motorcycles, those are our people. If you see these officers that have traffic on the side of their car with the big tag reader cameras on the back, those are our units. So we spend a lot of time in high crime areas. We spend a lot of time trying to deal with complaints that come into us from our citizens. As a matter of fact, many of those complaints come from all of you. And we take those complaints very seriously, and we handle those complaints to the best of our ability. So I think that it is important for our citizens to understand a couple of things. Number one, you are safe. You are safe from the police. You are safe in this city. And I want you to hear me one more time. You are safe. The data nationwide would tell you that issues involving police and police misconduct are not of such a matter that is being portrayed in the media. Now, some people will say one incident is too many, and I would agree with you. One police misconduct is too many, and we strive every single day to eliminate those. But we have to remember that we're human, and we make mistakes, and let's be real clear about one thing. The Columbus Police Department has spent years and years and years, long before me, putting things in place, putting policies in place, getting accreditations, having policies, having training that has made us one of the top law enforcement departments in this state and also in this country. Now, that's not because we get paid the most, because we don't. It's not because we're even one of the top paid law enforcement agencies around, because that's not the case either. These officers that you see up here are dedicated to the city because they love this city. And let me tell you my personal experience, and I can tell you from day to day to day, and all of this stuff that's going on across the country. It's going on in other places, but it is not going on here. Every single day I go out, if I go to lunch or if I'm just out moving around, and I wear a uniform every single day. And I wear the tall boots, and I wear that uniform on purpose. And every single time I'm out in the public, I always have someone walk up to me and say, "Officer, I really appreciate what you do. I know it's a hard time. I know that it is tough for you guys right now, but we really appreciate what you do." And let me make this clear. This is not just in Green Island Hills or out River Road. This is on South Lumpkin Road. This is on St. Mary's Road. This is on Buena Vista Road. This is on Victory Drive. This is on Broadway. This is all across the city. And if you look up here at these officers and you ask these officers that question, if they are experiencing the same thing, they will tell you that as well. And the only reason I'm here today is because, and you'll hear from our staff and our upper command in a little bit, I suspect. I am here because I feel like I have a understanding of what it is they're going through and what they're dealing with every single day. So they will tell you, I believe they'll tell you, I know they'll tell you, that they are experiencing the exact same stuff. So what that tells me is we don't have a situation where the majority of our citizens think that the police are mistreating people or there's misconduct that is running rampant. And that is the indication that is coming down with these kind of ordinances and that kind of stuff. And that is the feeling that the way these guys feel and the way I feel is that it is an attack on us to say what you're doing is improper and you are out of control and you got to have somebody else to tell you how to rein it in. Well, I'm here to tell you that the numbers don't support that. I'm here to tell you that our citizens as a whole don't support that. I'm here to tell you that if you ask your constituents, I don't believe they'll tell you that. I believe that there is a small group of people who are emotional at this point based on what is happening in other parts of the country. Okay? And I understand that. And I will never sit up here and tell you that things that are going on in other places are right, or make excuses for when officers do things that are improper or just downright illegal. I will never do that. But that is not here. Many of you have been here for such a long time that you know, if you're just being honest, you know that we have been immune to a lot of the issues that have gone on across the country. And that is absolute fact. When you look at what happened with officer-involved shootings in other parts of the country, we have been immune from that here. We have been immune from issues that have come up across the country and the protests and the riots that have come up on the George Floyd issue in this town. So when we had our protest here, and we've had 5, it was my unit that was in charge of, for the most part, in charge of handling all the traffic issues, leading the protesters to and from where they wanted to go. And most of those officers that were involved in that, they're sitting right up there. Now, let me make this real clear. None of those men and women up there had anything to do with George Floyd. Nothing. Not even a bit. None of those officers up there had anything to do with any kind of police misconduct. Okay? But yet, while they're out there on their day off, mind you, working in the heat, escorting protesters through the streets of our city so that they have the ability to be heard and be seen and be safe while doing it. And I can tell you that my chief made it real clear to me, Lance, we got to make sure nobody gets hit. We got to make sure that everybody that's in the street, that they're safe, and that we maintain the safety of these people and our citizens. Yes, sir. I got it. But let me tell you what a lot of people don't know. As these guys and girls are riding down the road, and some of them on motorcycles, some of them are in cars, and they're standing out at intersections. People are walking by, and they are absolutely screaming at them. And they're screaming, "I can't breathe." They're screaming all of these things that go on that, in the reality of it all, they had nothing to do with. So if we want to talk about fairness, we want to talk about professionalism, we want to talk about highly trained officers, That's what you're looking at up there. Because highly trained officers and officers that are professional in nature and officers who care about their citizens, all citizens, not based on color or race or gender or anything else, they care about all citizens, they showed up 3 weekends in a row on their days off. Now, I could have given them the next Monday off. I was within my right to do that. My major would have allowed me to do that, no problems. But you know what they said? Lieutenant, we don't want to be off. We're coming into work. So they showed back up on Monday, and they worked their 5 days, and then Saturday hit again. For 3 weeks in a row, they came in on their day off in the burning up sun, and they did it over and over and over again. Even though people looked at them and they said, what you are doing is wrong, we don't appreciate you, and they still showed up every single day. So those are the kind of people that you have working for the Columbus Police Department. So let me just talk briefly about what happens in a use of force investigation. When there is a use of force, and Mr. LaRusso mentioned it, that every use of force is investigated by the Columbus Police Department. There are use of force reports, there are offense reports, they're investigated. Let me tell all of you, and this is more for the citizens than anybody, what that process looks like. So an officer uses force. It could be that they had to put somebody on the ground. It could be that they had to use pepper spray. They had to use a taser, any force. What happens next is they notify their sergeant, who says and that there was force used. The sergeant responds to the scene. The sergeant investigates it. He talks to everybody involved, to include the person that the force was used on. And that's investigated. The sergeant writes it up. The officer writes it up. The sergeant writes it up. The sergeant reviews it. He makes a recommendation. Then he gives it to the lieutenant, which is me. So on a shift, there are 3 lieutenants on every shift, because there's 1 for each off day. So if I get that report and that use of force report as a lieutenant, then I'm going to review it. I'm going to go over it. I'm going to go through that process. I'm going to watch the videos that are available, and I'm going to look at the recommendation, and then I'm probably going to have a discussion with the other 2 lieutenants as well, just to make sure we're all clear and we don't miss anything. So now that's about 3 other hands that it goes through. When I'm comfortable with that and I'm done with that, then I forward it to the shift captain. And the shift captain does an investigation. He reviews it. He watches the video. And we discuss it, and we come up with a plan of action. If there's any disciplinary action that needs to be done, what that disciplinary action is going to be, and what that looks like, or if it is deemed to be within policy, then we move that from the captain to the bureau major. The bureau major then does it again. He looks at it, he investigates it, he looks at the video, and he goes through that same process. At any time that there is some discussions that need to be had through this process, then those discussions are had, so we make sure that we have the right information and we have done the right thing by this investigation. So when the major is done with it, then he moves it up to the assistant chief. The assistant chief goes through it. He does the same thing. He watches the video. He goes through the same process, and it is vetted again. Then it'll go to OPS. OPS will investigate it. They'll look at it. And if you don't know what OPS is, the Office of Professional Standards, Internal Affairs is how people recognize it. So they go through it. They look at it. They investigate it. They either say, hey, nope, something's wrong with it, send it back, or they say, okay, you're good with what you're doing, move it forward, and it goes to the chief of police, and the chief of police then, guess what? He does it, he reads it, he goes through it, and he vets it again. So by the time a use of force gets through, all the way through the chain, it has gone through 6 to 8 hands. That is how many times it's vetted. So we want to talk about transparency. We want to talk about how the process works and how officers are held accountable. Well, these officers and their uses of force are vetted ad nauseum. I'll just be honest with you. I mean, it is gone through over and over and over again. And then guess what? anything that is available, anything that is report-wise, once it's closed, is subject to open records. So you want to talk about transparency, and I heard that several times from people that spoke tonight, is we want transparency. I don't know how much more transparency you can get than to be able to legally obtain every single thing in an investigation. I don't know how much more transparent you can possibly be. So I think our citizens need to understand that process, and they need to understand this is the process that it goes through. So let me give you a kind of an example of some of my experiences. When I told you that I spent 10 years, 11 years in the violent crimes unit, one of the things that we did in that unit was we investigated officer-involved shootings from the criminal standpoint, okay? Now, OPS investigates the administrative side. We investigated if there was no death involved, we investigated the shooting side from the criminal standpoint. Not one time in my 10 or 11 years of investigating those kind of cases did I have one officer walk in my office and refuse to give me a statement. Not one time. Let me say that one more time. Not one time did they ever walk in there and refuse to give me a statement. Now, that is not the case today, because there is a lack of trust. There is a lack of trust in the process. There's a lack of trust in people's ability to, or the risk that politics will have some kind of effect on what the outcome may be. So now, what happens is they don't give statements at all at this point. They call their attorney, and the attorney comes in, and the attorney advises them whether to give a statement or not. But they're not going to do it without the presence of an attorney. So you want to talk about subpoena power, you want to talk about this commission. I completely agree with Mr. LaRusso when he says, in my opinion, when an officer, even if the commission was able to get subpoena power, when the officer shows up, he may show up because he has to under subpoena, but he doesn't have to talk. He can plead the fifth, and he can refuse to talk and give a statement. Now, in my opinion, that is going to divide our community even more, because the community is going to look at this and they're going to go, well, they clearly aren't talking because they did something wrong. But that is the farthest from the truth as could possibly be, because people want to look at what happened in Minnesota, and they want to look at what happened in Brunswick, and they want to look at what happened all across the country, and it's okay for them to be emotional and to be concerned about behavior that has happened in other places, but it's not okay for police officers to be concerned about how they're being treated an hour and 15 minutes up the road. And those are real issues. There are real due process issues going on in Atlanta, Georgia right now. So when I hear one of the speakers say, we need to call Atlanta down here to train our officers, I don't think that's a good idea. Atlanta's got all kinds of problems, and we don't need those problems here. And in my opinion, what we're doing by going down this road is we are bringing other people's problems into our city. And we're creating issues that we don't have. Now, when I look out here and I look at our chief of police and our assistant chief is up there and many of our majors are here, when I look at these dedicated men and women, I think they have dedicated their life to ensuring that we have the very best police department that we could possibly have in this city. I mean, I'm talking about 40, almost 50 years at a time experience and dedication to this city. That's staggering. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't have 49 years in me. I just don't. I don't think I do. But when I think about what they've done and the things they've done to ensure that we are highly trained, that we are doing the very best we can for the citizens of our city. I am very proud to have been part of that. Now, I'll admit, they've done some things over the course of my career that I've looked at and went, I don't understand why we do this. I think this is ludicrous. But every single time, I end up eating those words because something happens and they have the forethought to say and to look down the road and say, you know what? All the things that people are talking about that they need to do to fix their problems in their cities, well, guess what? We've already done that here. All those things that people are talking about, body cameras and de-escalation and all that kind of stuff, we already do all that. We already do that. We have been doing that for years here. But our citizens are so misinformed that they don't understand that our officers have to go through de-escalation techniques every single year just so they can keep their post certification, just so they can keep their arrest powers, just so they can have a job. I think it's important that they understand that. I think it's important that they understand that the things that they're asking for the most part, we already do. I think it's important to understand that these policies and stuff are in place. When I look at the proposals and I look at the resolution, and I believe our staff will talk about that more, and I won't go deeply into that, I look at that and go, we already do all that stuff. The language is just wrong. You can't say no chokeholds. You can't say all chokeholds are prohibited. You can't be that matter of fact because you don't understand that I may be in a situation where I'm on the ground and I'm fighting a guy that outweighs me by 200 pounds, and we're fighting and he's trying to get my gun, and I know that I am about to give out of gas. Because a fight, it don't take long. If any of you have ever wrestled in high school or ever been in an actual fight, you understand it don't take long. It's a minute, 2 minutes, and you're done. You're gassed. And the only thing I have is control of his neck. And if he gets my gun, he's going to kill me. You can't tell me that I can never use a chokehold under any circumstances. That is going to get one of these men and women killed. Now, I'm very passionate about that because let me tell you what's a bigger problem across this country right now. You want to look at how many people are killed by police officers across this country? How about we have a conversation about how many police officers are being killed and how big of an increase that is today because of the climate that we are encouraging. So I would encourage all of you to consider that. I would encourage all of you to not allow things that are going on in other places that aren't relative to us, that we don't have here. Don't bring that garbage to our doorstep. Don't allow that to come to our doorstep. And that is extremely important to me. It is extremely important to these men and women of law enforcement here. I'll finish up with this, and I'll be honest with you, my delay was trying to decide whether I really wanted to say this or not, but I think it needs to be said. We have some conversations we need to have in this city. We do. We have some issues in this city that we need to discuss, and it's all across our city. It's not about race. It's not about a part of town. But we've got some things we need to have some discussions about. And I have talked with many people to include Mr. Hickey, who spoke before you today in support of this. And we discussed this yesterday. And it's a real touchy subject. And I get it. And I get that some people think that I should not be the one to say it. But I'm going to say it anyway because I think it's important. And I think that we can't move forward and that we can't solve problems unless we get it out in the open and we talk about it. So let me tell you the much bigger problem we have as it relates to crime and criminal activity in Columbus, Georgia. And in my opinion, these are the conversations we need to be having. We need to be talking about violent crime. Men and women that are out here, those are the things that we need to be sitting down at a table and talking about. How do we fix those problems? How do we stop 37, 38 murders in Columbus, Georgia? How do we deal with that? How do we address crime-ridden neighborhoods? Let's have those conversations. Those are the real issues here. Those are far bigger issues than what we're here talking about today. And those are the kind of things we need to be talking about. Those are the kind of things we need to be talking with our pastors about, our other city leaders about. And Mayor, you and I have had this conversation on a committee that we were on when we talked about things going on across the city and things that we can do to make things better. And, you know, you said to me, I brought up some solutions as it relates to enforcement because you know that I'm an enforcement guy, okay? But you said something to me that resonated with me, and I thought about it long after we talked. And you just said it kind of quickly, and you moved on, but it kind of stuck with me, and I've thought about it many times after that. And that was, it can't just be about enforcement. It's got to be about community involvement. It's got to be about getting other people on board. It's got to be about doing other things along with the enforcement to solve the violent crime issues and problems. And so I agree with you. I agree with you. Those are the conversations we need to be having. Those are the things we should be dealing with because your loved ones, all of you, and it doesn't have anything to do with race, but your loved ones are most at risk by people who are committing violent crimes. You're not at risk because of your contacts with the police. You are absolutely not. And I believe that with my whole heart. You are more at risk, and your loved ones are more at risk by people committing violent crimes in this city. So let's have those conversations. Let's sit down and have those conversations. Let's deal with those issues. And then we'll be making real progress. So I'm going to end with that. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight, and God bless.
Lieutenant, thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Pat Hughley Green. I am a voter and citizen in District 1, 1360 Kevin Court. I didn't have anything to say tonight until I start hearing data because I'm data driven. And it's important that your data is balanced. And Mayor, being the law enforcement chief, I encourage you to provide the citizens of that data so we don't have to go through open records requests as was suggested. Give us the information about our perfect city. Because I don't believe that we're perfect because we're not a perfect people. That's impossible, but we have to work at being collaborative and working with one another and expressing ourselves collectively. I can't tell you how many young people that I speak to, and I have a fortunate opportunity to speak with a lot of young people, sir. Lieutenant, they do not feel safe from our police officers. So let's not pretend like we have zero issues and all of our police officers are perfect. And I love you guys, and nobody can call the police like Pat Hughley Green. I even know how to call the police chief. So I appreciate your work and everything that you do. But when you look at data, when you start quoting data, you have to be balanced. And so I just Googled on my phone, an article in AJC. Talks about Black Georgians shot by police tend to be younger with a median age of 29. About 1 in 6 of those fatally shot by police are unarmed. About 2 in 5 of those fatally shot by police were shot in the back. Most were also wounded elsewhere on their body. 3 out of 5 black decedents were shot in the back unarmed compared to 2 of 3 white decedents. 1 in 4 had mental health issues. A third of the 297 officers who fired their weapons in fatal police shootings had 5 years or less of experience on the streets. 4 out of 5 officers who fired a fatal police shooting were white. 10 cases were considered by only 10 were considered by criminal grand jury. An officer was indicted in just 1 of those 10 cases. So data is important, and I think that as a citizen, to help me help young people feel better, to help my 15-year-old son who feel better, is to tell us what are the statistics for our police department in our community. We know about the crime-ridden neighborhoods. We know about the work that we need to collectively as citizens work on behaviors and conduct of our citizens in Muskogee County. But the question at hand, let's keep the main thing about the main thing. What we're talking about tonight, provide the citizens with all of the data that shows the number of police officers we have on our force. How many years, to segregate that by their years of experience. How many have misconduct reprimands? How many of them have had a police fire of using their weapon on a citizen? How many have they killed? Give us the data so people don't have to go off these statistics and skewed or, as the gentleman said, misguided. Some misguided data. Just give us the data. We shouldn't have to go to an open records request, and let's work on expanding community policing so that our young people in Muskogee County won't be afraid of the police, including my 15-year-old son, who said to me, don't even worry about me getting my license, Mom, because I don't want to have an encounter with the police. And I have to encourage him not to allow anyone to take that power from him. And I'm not a mother alone. You just had a lot of mothers here earlier, and because it's late in the evening, moms need to be at home, including me. So you had all these women here because we want to talk about the issue at hand. We want to work with our community. We are leaders in our community. We are parents, and we want the data so that we can be better informed. Because if it's perfect, then I will lead the parade in talking about how perfect we are and how we love our police, because I do. I depend on the police. And if you guys are working on your day off without pay for the protest, I am really impressed. So let's get the data to the citizens without the citizens having to do an open record request, and make sure that it's balanced, make sure that it's complete, and make sure that it's thorough. And I just wanted to say that because when I hear data and it was just so one-sided, because I know he's hired by the Fraternal Order of Police and he's coming here to do his job, but listen to all those people who were here who are actually voters and citizens in Muskogee County, not by any organization, but the voters in Muskogee County. Provide us with the data so that we can also come back together and talk about how we go forward together, because that's all this is about, how we go forward together. And the last thing I'm gonna say is, Mr. City Attorney, it sounds like this lawyer said y'all need to go back to do your work better. Thank you, have a good evening.
Good evening. Protocol has already been established. Hello, my name is Joyce Dent Fitzpatrick. I'm with the West Georgia Central PBA, Police Benevolent Association. I do have a presentation. Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, it's up here. Not working? Okay. Can you start it back from the beginning, please? Okay, these are the ordinances that were sent to me Friday. So I've been up over the weekend, and if I lose my voice, it's because I've been talking all weekend. What I have before you is 152 years of police officers, 152 years of people who have dedicated their lives to being the best police officer that they can be. My responses to the ordinance that I was sent is police officers who use excessive force in arrest of nonviolent offenses will be investigated by the Office of Professional Standards Discipline as appropriate up to including termination. The officer's post certification will also be reviewed and revoked where appropriate. The answer to this is police officers who use excessive force in arrest for nonviolent offenses shall be investigated by the Office of Professional Standards as directed by the police chief. We already do this. Chokeholds are prohibited by the Columbus Police Department. This is our policy. Officers who are empowered by the law to use reasonable force like Lieutenant Deaton has already told you, if I'm fighting with a man who's half my size or bigger than me, and my only alternative is to choke him, I will be using that defense because that's the only way I'm going to go home to my family. So it's to be used as it's deemed necessary. The second one, CPD will use all state and national databases. Let me clear something up. We already do this. I served as a recruiting officer for 5 years. We always contact the other agency that someone has worked for. We get out, we canvass, we do a background check, we do a thorough background check. I have traveled to many cities and looked in police officers' files and saw what they had done in terms of termination. We send those up to the police chief and to the staff, and they make a determination if we're going to hire that police officer from another agency. This is already being done. All CPD officers will be required to wear body cameras and activate them when they are interacting with the public in the course of their duties. Officers intentionally turning off their cameras or who fail to turn on their cameras will be subject to discipline, including termination. The response to this is all CPD officers who are assigned a body camera will be required to wear them. We're already doing what the ordinance is already asking us. And I'm skipping along here. All officers will be required to take a de-escalation and unconscious bias training. I stand before you as a state certified trainer, CIT, crisis intervention trainer. We have to train every incoming police officer with how to de-escalate in a situation. We also have to train for CITY. That is youth. Someone came up here and said that when we encounter a mental health patient or a mental health client or citizen of this city, that we don't know how to de-escalate. I am here to tell you that we do know how to de-escalate. We get this training once a year. Every officer up here is certified by Georgia Post. We have to have de-escalation training once a year to keep our certification. This is already being done. All officers receive the de-escalation and bias training. Another proposal, candidates for employment must pass a fitness for duty psychological evaluation upon being hired. Once hired, officers must undergo fitness for duty and psychological evaluations as needed as a needed basis. This is what we already do. All of our candidates have to go through a pre-employment psychological screening. That is mandatory. They also have to take a mandatory eye detect test to see if they have lied on their application. This is already being done by the Columbus Police Department. Another proposal, all officers will be required to intervene if they observe another officer engaged in illegal behavior with excessive force. I'm going to read you the policy first. The police department's professional conduct policy requires each officer to protect the rights of all people, everyone. Now, I can tell you we are not Minneapolis Police Department. All of us standing before you abhor what happened in Minneapolis. George Floyd was murdered. Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, but he was not murdered by the police. Breonna Taylor was killed by the police. Mr. Rayshard Brooks was killed by the police, but Rayshard Brooks had a part in his killing, okay, in his death. Let's be clear about that, because the three-pronged test tells us that if they have the ability, the opportunity, and put you in jeopardy, that we have to protect you, and that's just what happened. But we're not given our due process. We are being arrested in 2 days by a district attorney who's, in my opinion, was overzealous and arrested 2 police officers in Atlanta without them getting their due process. The GBI is an independent agency who governs the police. They have no dog in that fight in Columbus, Georgia. So when we are involved in a shooting, they come in and they investigate us. While we are sitting at our house, you think that we're sitting there watching TV and eating, popcorn. That's not what we're doing. We are having a psychological, I guess, stand still in our minds. What did we do wrong? Am I going back to work? Will I do it again? Those are the things, that's vicarious PTSD that we go through too. So with that being said, all of the proposals that the Pop Barnes had put before us, we agree with it because we're already doing it. The PBA response to a Citizens Review Board Commission with subpoena power, we absolutely do not support a Citizens Review Board to govern the police. And this is why. Because I don't sit on a board where beauty and barbershops get to have a review, because that's not my lane. I don't sit on the medical review board because I'm not a surgeon. That is not my lane. I do not sit at a realtor's board because I don't know how to sell a house or rent an apartment. That is not my lane. What I do say, and I do believe that we should have in this, we should have some police reform, because we cannot police the way we policed when I was hired in 1987. I've been a police officer for 36 years. I came from Phoenix City, Alabama, and then over here to Columbus. 3 years over there and 33 over here. So I have a lot of police background. I support a citizens review, but can you put my PowerPoint back? Back to the next slide. The last slide. I'll just tell you, I support a citizens review board with subpoena power, but it will not be with the citizens. If you're going to have a police review board, put some police officers who are retired on that board, who already know what to do. You know what we go through every day. It can be a deputy sheriff. It was the last slide. It could be a deputy sheriff. It can be a retired judge. It can be a retired federal worker. If you want to police us, let us sit on our own boards, like the medical field sits on their boards, like the housing authority sits on their boards. You cannot put a citizen in place to tell us after the fact, Monday morning quarterback, that I should have done something if you've never walked in those shoes, if you've never shot anybody. And I praise God that I have not had to shoot anybody, that I could have shot some people, but I did not. I can tell you, if you don't know what flesh smells like, if you don't know that going into somebody's house who doesn't have anything but cat food and roaches are in the refrigerator, and you can't unsee children who have been killed, and when you say we should not shoot at a moving vehicle, well, let me say this. If I'm standing at your house and somebody has hurt somebody in your family, and that car drives by while I'm standing there and taunt you as a citizen of Columbus, Georgia, you're telling me that I should not shoot at that moving car unless it's your family. I should not put somebody in a chokehold because of something that happened in Minneapolis. But if that's the only way I get to go home to my family, that's what I'm going to have to use by any means necessary, because I'm not going to stand there and let you spit and shoot at me, and I got to go through all of these ordinances wondering if I'm going to have a job or if I'm going to be taken in front of some people that have no idea what we go through every day, putting on a uniform every day and coming back and listening to people tell me how bad I am. We do not have a problem with a peaceful protest. But let's be clear. Let's protest everything then. If you want to protest a black-on-black crime, protest those 3 kids, those 3 children who were killed in one weekend. I didn't see not one march for those children. But whenever it comes down to a black, white, or an Asian police officer doing something, we have all these protests. I am very upset about what happened to George Floyd. Everybody standing here is upset about that. But we are not the enemy. It's been said, when you see a fight, when you see a good fight, get in it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a good fight. This is a great fight, and we are in it. We're not going to go away. I will stand here until I can't talk to protest a Citizens Review Board with subpoena power. You cannot have an average citizen, and I'm not taking anything away from anybody, but if you work at TSIS, AFLAC, the Piggly Wiggly, you have no idea, none, what we have to go through. And if you're going to have a Citizens Review Board, make it all-inclusive. Make it all-inclusive. You need at least 10 to 12 people to be all-inclusive. You need black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Muslim, Catholic, LGBTQ. You need everybody to sit on that board, because that's what you're looking at. You're not looking at somebody who lives on Macon Road, Buena Vista Road, Casita Road. You're looking at the whole city, and stats do mean a lot. And it's been 1% of police officers shooting someone, and it was found that they violated that person's right. And I know, Pop Barnes, you talked about the incident that happened in Columbus, and you said you were not made aware of it. I am so sorry that you were not made aware of it. It hurt all of us. It hurt us. But I believe that things are in place right now, moving forward, that will never happen again. I've had countless conversations with city council members. I've talked to Mayor Honorable Skip Henderson on at least 2 occasions for the PBA. He has been very, very, he has accommodated us. He's listened and he's helped us. And so I'm going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to come down here. I'm going to continue to fight and speak up for the police officers who do not want a police Citizens Review Board with subpoena powers. I talked to the Atlanta officers last night, and I asked them, how's that working for y'all up there in Atlanta? And this is the response: a laugh, and then it was, we just don't even testify when we have to go there. So now you got a tiger without teeth. You got a subpoena, but the people don't have to testify. So what good is that going to do you? None. When we've been investigated by our agency, we've been cleared by our agencies, when we've been investigated by the GBI, and then we come back to work, we got to go before another board to tell us, well, we didn't like the way you talked to them, or we didn't like the way you put the handcuffs on them. No, we think this needs to be looked at a little bit differently. We have an officer who was on the streets for 4 months who killed 2 people. Justified, bank robbery. That officer had to sit at home for 3 years before he was allowed to come back to work. 3 years. That officer means a lot to me because I named him when he was born. Now I see another generation coming up here. This is unacceptable for an officer to have to sit at home for 3 years to be justified in a shooting. And when he was justified by the GBI and cleared by our agency, the district attorney's office did not take it to the grand jury. It took them 3 years. 3 years. That's unacceptable, ladies and gentlemen. Now you're telling me that this officer in this day and age would have to come back before a Citizens Review Board with subpoena power to reopen his case. To me, it's like refrying the meat. It's already done. I smell hair. Let it go. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. Get some people who are already knowledgeable of police work, who can tell somebody, hey, this is what I see. Get some people from all walks of life to tell you this is what I see. The advisory board is great. We met with them yesterday. 2 of their members were there. Mr. Beckley and Mr. Hickey were there. Now, there's some divide there because Mr. Beckley supports us, and he's on the advisory committee. He said, I don't see any need to create another agency to police you guys after you've been cleared of something. I applaud him for that because I shouldn't have to walk on eggshells to come to work to do my job. Nobody standing back here should have to come to work and wonder, okay, I've been cleared, but now I got to go before another committee to see what I did wrong. That's my view. That's the PBA's view. We stand behind 100% against this proposal, and we implore you to think about it. Until you've walked in our shoes, until you know what it feels like to go home and smell blood in your nostrils after you've been on a crime scene, and then you try to go and play with your kids, and all you have is that vision, and then somebody come and tell you, well, look, I'm looking at this thing Tuesday morning, you should have done this, you could have done this better. Can we all improve? Absolutely. Do we need police reform? We welcome it. We are not your enemy. We are here to help. We are here to work with you. The PBA has done so many things in this community. We've done balloon releases. We go to the hospitals. We do things with the homeless. We do the parks, the dog bark in the parks. We have every agency on our board. 2 members are not here, and they're from CSU. We have the Sheriff's Department represented on our board, the Police Department, Muskogee County Prison, Muskogee County Sheriff's Department, and we have the Marshal's Department. And we have a retired police officer on our board as well. So we are well diverse on the agencies. We're well diverse in our ethnicity, in our races, in our cultures. Everybody on this board brings something to the table. And nobody's opinion is invalid. But we stand behind no Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board with subpoena power, period. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Mayor, Council. I'm a retired police officer, retired here at Columbus Police Department, almost 22 years. Pop Barnes, you know you're dear to my heart. You was with me, you supported me when my wife came back from the Gulf War and died of her symptoms. You were there. The police department, I did 3 years in the military, came to the police department, worked there, and I just think there's mechanisms in place that would take care of all this that's going on. If you hadn't grown up as a black male, you don't know what it feels like when racism hits you. So you can have that conversation all day long, but until you wake up black and you've been discriminated against, you will know. I think the folks that came up here, they're concerned. They're concerned about their kids. I'm concerned about mine. Everybody should be. But I just think there needs to be a conversation had. Yeah, things can be better, but I can remember starting at this police department when folks came from Houston, Texas, New York, other states, to recruit our officers because they were well trained. And this department has stood behind me. They were very receptive of me when I had to work 2 or 3 jobs to support my family and take care of my wife, but they were there. And I think they have done an awesome job in the city. Yes, it could be better, but something that happened up the road, another state, I just think we're better than that. And one thing I was told, which I think Lieutenant Wynn told me, we do not teach ethics and morals. Your parents should have taught that. With me saying that, Pop Barnes, I love you. I just don't think the board need to have subpoena power. You have good officers. You're going to have a bad apple in there. Take care of that one. Make sure you get them out of there. But the police stay on. and I think they're doing a good job. So, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Good evening,
Good
Mayor
evening.
Henderson, city councilors. I work with the Muskogee County Sheriff Department, and my name is Antoinette Braxton Holloway. And I am currently a lieutenant at the Sheriff Department, and I work with the grievance within the jail. What I want to say is, for me, I've seen both sides. Originally, I'm from Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. And where I grew up, nobody accepted me. I am a black female. I've seen things from the police side, even as a child, I've seen things. I've seen where I myself was tear gassed out of my home from my great-grandmother's home in Ohio. And what I believe in now is what I went through in my life, it caused me to really care about people. I care about both sides. And I always heard, like when I started working in law enforcement, I've been through so much, but I still ended up working in law enforcement, even though I used to be so afraid of the police. I am no longer afraid. Through my training, I have learned so much. I've learned that no matter where you go in this life, you have to have the diversity. You can't have all these biases, and I know I don't. I love all people. I care about people, and I know I hear people always say, well, with police, there's a code of silence. Well, for me, there is no code of silence. We are trained. We know that you have to intervene if you see anybody using excessive force on anybody. I know that. And all these things are in place now. And I do not agree with us having a citizens review board that has subpoena power, because everything is already in place. And I don't think police officers should be put in a place where there's like, they're gonna always second guess themselves as far as how to do their job. It's like you would just make them like out of puppets. I just wanted to say, I oppose it. I respect all of you. But I think we need to work within our communities. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's not by retaliating against good officers, because we have a lot of good officers. Yes, are there some corrupt officers? Yes, but there are ways to weed those type of people out. And I, for one, know if I saw an officer that was bad or using excessive force, I'm going to bring it to their attention and to my superior's attention and make sure something's done about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we've got one more individual.
I apologize if my remarks are scattered. I didn't intend to speak today, but I just want to offer a rebuttal to some of the points that have been said. I think a lot of what people have said has lost the point of what we came here to talk about today. We have to avoid these red herrings and understand what the issue is that we're talking about. So we need to focus on the true intent. CBD has nothing to do with these other issues, as they have said, that take place across this country. I myself, growing up, had never had an issue with the police. I have never had a negative interaction with the police. However, police systems in general are part of a greater system that needs to be reassessed and looked at. And that's part of what we're doing here today. By empowering a citizens advisory board, what it does is not just the literal fact of giving it subpoena power, it increases citizen confidence in the police. With the use of subpoena power, any issues that the public might have towards a response from the police would be mitigated. Say an incident does occur and it was justified by the police, and legally it is a justifiable response, but the public has an outcry about it. Through the use of subpoena power by Citizens Advisory Board, as well as concurrently investigations by other agencies such as the police department itself or the GBI, it allows the citizens themselves to know that the incident was handled correctly. I don't understand what the issue is with citizens seeking more information to understand the situation. A lot of times the speakers before me were speaking about misinformation amongst the public. That is a great issue. Is that not the purpose of subpoenas? To get more information so they can be better informed? Something I often see when people respond to beliefs about law enforcement is that there's no reason to fear police if you do nothing wrong. Now, there are many cases where people have done nothing wrong, but yet face actions from the police. But even those set aside, the same could be said for law enforcement under the case of this review board. If the police have done nothing wrong, then subpoena power, as well as investigations in general, would turn that to light. If there's no wrongdoing, then what is the issue with an investigation? A lot has been said about making sure that those on the board, would they not be properly qualified to even oversee the police. One, from the way I was raised and the way I always thought of it as a child and as I see it now, the police are there to protect and serve the citizens, just as the government in general is, as reflected by our institutions of democracy and voting. So what is the issue with regular citizens, the ones who have to interact with the police, being the ones on the board that oversees the police or works closely with them? And in order to mitigate any potential risk of unqualified people sitting on this board or making decisions that they aren't in the place to understand correctly, you can have people such as experts that have spoken before me come and serve and give their testimony in order to give a more well-rounded understanding of any situation. It doesn't have to just be a closed box of discussion where no one can bring witnesses or no one can bring expert testimony. That is why we have experts. That's why we have people who know the information. I believe that this board, empowering it, increases citizen confidence and respect between the citizenry and the police department and public servants in general. How often is it that we have these investigations for violent crime in Columbus and the police cannot conduct an investigation thoroughly because no witnesses come forward to testify, because there is a distrust in the police? By allowing the citizens to have their own process and to have further trust in the system through a more empowered citizens review board, it mitigates the risk that people have distrust in the system and therefore will not come forward. Yes, we are looking at the hard facts of, does this board have subpoena power or not? But you also have to understand the soft power dynamics behind it. If I knew, having whatever distrust or whatever feelings I may have towards law enforcement, if I knew that there was a board in place where people like me of all walks of life that represent the whole city can come together and work, so it's not just law enforcement enforcing law enforcement, but the citizens of the city having a say in it, I believe that would cause citizens to have a more general, respectful relationship, working relationship with law enforcement, and would probably help not just citizens' feelings, but law enforcement's feelings as towards helping investigations and general police and community relations.
Young man, if you don't mind, I apologize. Can you give us your name for the record?
I apologize. My name is Sean Gatewood.
Okay,
I stay off of St. Mary's in Bunker Hill, and I've been in Bunker Hill my whole life.
All right, thank you.
I apologize. I believe that measures such as these proposed by Pop Barnes are just the beginning of a series of measures that could be taken place to greater build a relationship between the public and the government that serves them. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you.
Mr. Gatewood, thank you for your comments. All right, Mr. City Attorney, I think that's all the input on this particular first reading.
Mayor, I would recommend that you consider an amendment to Councilor Barnes' ordinance having to do with the review of certain closed investigations. I would add closed investigations into each subparagraph. I told Councilor Barnes that I would recommend that. This is in section 2, A, B, and C. I would add that. That's something to consider. It's your discretion.
Is there any, I think the challenge was that if this ordinance passes and there is an active investigation underway, it could create some conflict. Is that not
Yeah,
right?
it certainly could. If you had a GBI investigation or an FBI investigation, DOJ, grand jury with the district attorney, a special grand jury, that's why we would recommend they could only issue subpoenas in the case of a closed investigation that we would define similar to the state law definition.
Okay. Is a motion from Councilor Davis. Is there a second? Councilor Barnes has seconded the motion to amend as stated by the city attorney. Any discussion to the amendment? To the, it's on.
Mr. City Attorney, I know there were some things that were talked about by law tonight, and certainly in some of the research I've done, there's some gray area in all this. Some would argue that it's unconstitutional, and others would say it's not. But I don't think it's clear on that, and that's probably a matter for the state to decide at some point in time. But I heard a couple things said in reference to law.
I'll get this out.
About some of the, I guess, verbiage, the terms that are in the, I think we have 2 ordinances before us, but some of the terms tonight, as far as it already relates to law, state law, I'm not a qualified lawyer, and certainly I'm not going to sit here and try to cherry pick pieces, bits and pieces, but that does concern me, and I would hope that your office would evaluate that or have a chance to take a close look at that if there is any conflicting words or verbiage here pertaining to the law. I raise that concern because of some of the comments that were made tonight.
We've done that, Counselor. That's why I'm recommending this particular amendment. When we get to the resolution further down the agenda, we have some other comments.
All right. Are there any other comments or any other questions regarding the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, could you
Councilor Thomas, yes, ma'am.
Could you have the city attorney again repeat what that amendment is?
It would insert in subsections A, B, and C in section 2 of your ordinance, authority to receive, review, and investigate complaints in closed investigations. In all 3 of those paragraphs, we'd put that in, and for purposes of this ordinance, an investigation is closed when it is complete, and all direct litigation involving such investigation or prosecution has become final or otherwise terminated. We would recommend that so it not interfere with a GBI, FBI, any other ongoing investigation.
And that's in section 2 dash 234.
Point one, little A, B, and C. That would be added in each one.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions or any more comments to the amendment? If not, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that amendment is incorporated into the ordinance. It'll be brought back, I guess, on the 11th.
It will, Mayor, with that amendment. And then the next item, somewhat related, is the proposal by the Mayor Pro Tem to send use of force reports to the Public Safety Advisory Commission. Let them review closed investigations with the same definition based on use of force reports provided to them, and it's ready for any discussion.
Councilor, Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my privilege to publish this ordinance for council's consideration. Let me say first that on May 25th, when I saw the news about George Floyd, my heart hurt. And I think anybody that saw that felt the same way. If you don't, and I believe you don't have a heart. But let me tell you, within a few days after May 25th, our mayor and his staff began working on an ordinance for the Public Safety Advisory Committee to have them to improve their ability to work and I guess reissue the charge to that committee. The mayor wanted the Public Safety Advisory Committee to be meaningful, transparent, and allow the citizens more input. Section 1 of both ordinances address the same issues. The main difference is in Section 2. And this ordinance will allow the Public Safety Advisory Committee to review all use of force reports on closed cases on a monthly basis. I appreciate the mayor's vision to bring this to council for our consideration. Later, our chief, Rick Boren, will discuss in more detail about the use of force reports and how they are. You've already heard a little bit about it with other speakers, but he's going to go in a little more detail so we have a better understanding of the use of force reports. Mayor, I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I look forward to the discussion with fellow councilors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The only comments I'll make is that, I want to make sure that council knows that this discussion on trying to make the Public Safety Advisory Council more viable and do exactly what we've heard so many people talk about today is making things transparent and raising accountability. The conversations that I've had with the chief of police have been instrumental in helping us identify this. A lot of these powers already exist. If they want to if that commission wanted to look at a use of force report, they could. And one thing I think this does is under the other ordinance, it talks about the use of deadly force as being a reviewable issue. This particular ordinance actually makes any use of force all the way from just putting your hands on somebody all the way up to deadly force. It allows the Public Safety Advisory Commission to look at it if they need supporting documentation, whether it's a body cam footage or whether it's some more information. They make an open records request, and because they're an extension of the government, there's not a fee for that for them to be able to further review, and then they can send it back to the chief of police or the public safety director, which is the mayor, or the Office of Professional Standards, and just say, I'd like you to take another look at this. But it's a way just to try to make sure that the Public Safety Advisory Commission is doing what I think is their core mission. That is to enhance the communication between the public and the public safety departments. I guess it's on first reading. It's a public hearing, so if anybody wants to speak in favor of or against, Councilor Davis.
Yeah, Councilor Allen and I were discussing, I think in both ordinances, Mr. City Attorney, that the amendment should apply in both ordinances as it relates to closed investigations.